someone who I talk to, we talk about like sort of like a well. Like the introvert has like a deep well, and it's just like thought, idea, the reservoir. And I think for the extrovert, the well is like it fills up and then they pour it out. Like they fills up and then they pour it out. They fills up and pour it out. They just keep
pain. I think we'll get into that too. Like we were talking about empathy before. It's like I have no problem relating with someone's pain or empathy. It's like I'm in touch with your emotions more than I'm in touch with my own. Like hip hop has definitely been therapeutic for me though in that, because even the way I'm talking right now has so much more emotion than when I was younger. I couldn't even talk like this. I couldn't even go, hey, what's going on, man? I couldn't talk like that. It wasn't in my skill set. And little by little hip hop has definitely brought me out of that shell, being able to emote and to be able to tap into, like you said, the lion, and now I remember that. Like, so whenever I have to go give a presentation that's not about hip hop and just about me talking or whatever, now it's like, yo, remember you're a beast. Remember you're a lion. Remember.
So I'm gonna hit y'all with something that'll help. So take it to public speaking. We should do a whole episode on public speaking. So here's the thing about public speaking. I think most people who are introverts have been told like, oh, you're not good at public speaking. You're an introvert, right? You're timid. Oh yeah. I'm just like, no, it's just that the thing that you probably do well is seen as a crutch, right? Like if you're charismatic and you're outgoing, that's seen as like, oh, that's a good public speaker. It's like, no, that's just their gift. They're charismatic.
Right. Got to get this official. We got slow network connection on one side, and we got lack of pretty lighting on the other side. So it's funny the disparity. You're about to see the disparity in lighting in a second here. If this thing ever lets me in, what's going on? Yeah, there we go. And dingy. Boom. Boom. Is that a little better?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Let me see how I get out of here though, because now I'm cloudy. It's a trade-off. And how do I leave? All right, I'm gonna try to leave over here on the other side and not leave over here. This should work. Boom. Okay, there we go. That's good. All right. Well, that's best. And now let me make sure that I'm in Clubhouse. The problem was I couldn't be in two places at once on my phone. So going over here, and I take it you're already in the Clubhouse room, right, Bernard?
Nah, you didn't. I didn't set it up.
Oh, me either. Me either. Okay, cool. So let's do that. Or are you better? Or do you think you're more adept at doing that? Because if I do it, didn't I mess it up once?
Just do it through the club. You'll be fine. If you
through the club, all right.
Don't do it through the green button at the bottom.
All right. I'm just going through start a room, right? So, and then is there a club?
Schedule a room.
Schedule a room. Sorry. Okay. Schedule an event. Yeah. Schedule an event with co-host Bernard.
Just make sure the little replays thing.
I don't see Bernard, unless when I hit. Let's see the club. When I do the club, maybe it'll do it. So there's IntroVerse. Will it automatically add you?
No, I mean you should. I should come up. I don't know. Yeah, for whatever reason, I have to type PRO space L before it even shows you. Like if I start to do PRO, it doesn't even bring you up.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't even bring you up when I search for you. Um, I think it usually does, though. We do Hankins. Oh, you're the green rose. That's why. I couldn't see the bottom. It was. All right. Not tomorrow. We want to do now. September the 11th. Didn't even realize that till like, oops. Why did it go away, Bernard? Does it do that to you? I
What
was
happened?
I was like mid form posting it. And it shrunk down to the bottom of my screen, not to be found anywhere ever again.
What are you doing this on the computer?
No, I'm doing it on my phone.
Oh.
Let me take the phone out of the sky. Let's see. I originally had the show thing up here, so let's do this one more time. Clubhouse is sensitive to me. Like if I'm about to enter in a club and it doesn't want to do the club, it kind of shuts down everything I started. So yeah, it didn't save that. Of course not. Why would it do that? All right, let's do this the fast way. Can't fit in all the words I wanted, but
Yeah, just make sure the little replays toggle is on. Sometimes I don't know why it has it off. Like, why would I want this automatically off?
I think some people, with the being recorded, probably have a little heebie-jeebie.
Well, I mean, in my other club, like literally, I record almost every day, and I'm like, okay, I always have it switched on. So you think my default would have it just switched on?
Right.
Or sometimes I don't know. Sometimes it'll just be switched on, and then I start the room and it's off, and I'm like, I know it was on.
All right. It says on and it's up and running. 1 2 1 2 1 2. Check check. Of course, my mic is going to be ridiculous.
Check,
1 2 1 2.
check. All right, I'm in here.
Oops. Let me mute my sound there.
What up, Rosalind and Clubhouse?
I went to the store while I was getting my wife medicine to try to lost my headphones here. They had literally a hole in my pocket, and my headphones, the only thing important in there, fell through, but they're the only ones with the adapter for this type. So I go into GameStop and I say, yo, these are some really cool headphones. I said, do you know what kind of headphones they actually are? The ones I'm wearing, you probably can't see them, but they're Mandalorian headphones. And I was like, yo, these are dope. Actually, you can see this. This is the case they come in. And I'm like, yo, they're so new school. They got to come with the right tip, right? It's not old school. She's like, nah, let's open it. She opens it and it's old school. I'm like, this does me no good. So I still have no way to get into my new school. I call it new school. It's not really new school, as you know, but you know what I mean.
Right.
Not the 1/8 inch. Why does the word evade me right now? Micro USB? Is that what I'm trying to say? Yeah.
I don't know.
Doesn't have the micro USB.
I don't know.
So it throws your world in a tizzy. Because now I have to unmute my microphone by hand. The things we have to do. But I've done it before here, and no one has noticed before. So we're gonna run with it, and I'm gonna try to share this too. There was a couple people I talked about this week, and they were like, "I'm definitely gonna come through to your thing," and I said, "Yeah, come in a little after 6:30. We should be up and running." And if I can remember their names as I look, maybe I'll invite some in. But not sure. I see some people I know. So
I think I've given up on people.
Well, I mean, they've probably given up on us because we don't talk and there's no invitations.
Well, I mean this, but also in general, I'm just like, I haven't.
You mean in the macro sense?
I mean, I don't know what people want, so I'm tired. I don't.
You know
You
what?
know,
I hear you.
I'm
I
just
hear you.
like, some of the clubs, some of the rooms, I'm just like, okay, this is what people want to talk about.
Right.
Okay, I guess. I
Right.
guess. seems I don't know, seems pretty circular to me. I'm like, all right, let's talk about stuff that's going to move us forward.
Right. Right. I my man's telling me a radio interview that we're on is on. Um, it's um,
All right, well, I'm curious to hear about this topic. Pro sent me.
yeah.
I was like, all right, let's do it.
Yep. I'm still getting my. I'm trying to make it so that you guys don't hear too much feedback with the. So what we need to do before we get into this, what we need to do is we need to do a tech episode. And you know who the best person is with tech on Clubhouse? It's Dr. Mina Joe Blazy. She knows all things tech. And here are the issues that I have. Um, this is coming from a relatively tech savvy person, I have to say. I do like audiovisual for my university. I'm not officially, but by default, like the satellite that we're at, this person's only there once in a while, so I become that default all the time, right? So on the tech end, it's like I'm relatively, I was a certified business high school teacher before I was certified in anything. Obviously, I've been doing audio my whole life or whatever,
Right.
and as you just heard, I forgot what is it, micro USB? Like sometimes I know what I mean, but sometimes I'll forget the technical name. I'll be XLR, you know what I mean? A pause,
Right.
but I certainly, if you leave me in a room full of wires, I'm hooking it up, right? It's not going to be a problem. I'm going to get it set up. Now that being said, there are about 4 issues on Clubhouse that I don't fully know what to do, and I don't think this first one anyone knows what to do. So let's throw it out there for any of our people who are watching on Facebook or just listening on Clubhouse. Rick, we see you down there. We're just getting started, but on on this topic, how in the world, if you're live streaming, would it be best to capture the audio on Clubhouse? And I'm going to throw this disclaimer out. I know about Club Deck, which is the computer version of Clubhouse, and the audio is better. And you don't need an iRig or anything fancy like that. The audio is like 50% better than just using your phone, but not better than using an iRig. Which, if you've been on Clubhouse for a while, with the real popular ways that artists would play their music and not have any kind of like lag and have good quality, right? So what's the mechanism by which, like right now, I'm talking into my computer microphone that's live streaming us to 8 different places, and but sort of on the old school way, you're just hearing me analog through my phone. However, because I don't have a headphone plugged in right now, because I have a newer phone, it's a Samsung. Also, just got the bar to pop up, so let me make sure that the Wi-Fi is on. Because I don't have the headphone in there, the I'm not aware of a way to control my audio so that it doesn't give me just that little bit of audio once you're on the stage in Clubhouse. Like, does anyone know what I'm talking about? Yeah, I know you know, Bernard, right? There's no way to effectively shut off all your audio when you're in Clubhouse. So what it's doing is when you talk, I have to turn my volume down as low as I can. And because I
Right.
can't put the headphone jack in right now, even though I tried to go to the store and get one, only had one headphone jack, I can't completely shut off the audio so it picks up in my mic. So then I have to mute my mic over here and vice versa, the other way around. There's got to be a better way, right? Am I missing something?
No, I don't know. I think that's just the feature. I mean,
There's got to be a button in there. I
I
just
can
don't
look
know what it
deeper
is.
into it, but I think if your mic is on Clubhouse for whatever reason, it has that one little bit that doesn't let you turn it down all the way.
Yeah, crazy.
So I don't know. So
So it makes
let's
Club Deck better because on Club Deck you can just hit the button and shut it all off.
all right. Well, let's hear about this title. That's what I'm interested
All right.
in.
So yeah, so we got the title. We got God, social introvert, creative extrovert, and in full disclosure here, what I would say is Bernard is the topic guy for the for IntroVerse. There's no denying. So Bernard was probably shocked when I sent him a topic. Right? He's like, "What is this?" Right? Bernard is definitely topic guy. I'm just along for the ride, and I'm like, "Yeah, that works. I see where you're going here. I'll think of a couple of things, and we'll make it work." But in this particular one, I chose this topic, which when it comes to God, Bernard is the God guy out of the two of us, right? So it makes it even more strange that I would pick this topic. But what I was thinking about, I was actually thinking about this last week, and I know you mentioned you were thinking about something this week. I was thinking, I was looking at your titles of the rooms you do before, and you'll have a lot of the symbols and everything in there, and I'll look at like, what little emojis and icons you got popping. And usually you have like something in there that is in the philosophical, in the theological or whatever. And I was thinking about those topics, and I was like, as far as our show, is it in alignment with philosophy? Is it in alignment with like Christianity? Is it in alignment with, when I say alignment, I just mean like, would this reverberate through, we've been talking a lot about philosophy, and again, you're the resident philosopher. So, I certainly love philosophy, but probably not at the level of you. Um, and so I'm like, okay, would this reverberate through, like, would theists get with this? Because another truth be told, I spend a lot of my time in a lot of the Christian rooms, a lot of the Islam rooms, and a lot of the atheism rooms, and I find them fascinating. And whenever a
Right.
philosophy room pops up, I find it fascinating. And I'm sort of the middle ground guy because, like Bernard, you theoretically, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I was introducing you the other day when you weren't here, and I was like, Bernard's kind of like if you took a philosopher and a musician and a rapper and a theologian and a architect and an educator who does a little bit of everything, you'd have Bernard. Is that not a bad description?
Man, that's about right.
Right. And I'm like, I'm very similar, probably minus the theologian is probably we were scoring ourselves last week, or we were playing this little game of like what skills in hip hop we do. And I was throwing out there like our scores. I'm like, for MC, we might be right up by the top, but for beatboxing, maybe it's like 4 or 5 or 6 or something. And like my theology knowledge is probably lowest on that, though it's not like I'm, clueless. And let me give a backstory. When I was taking my first job in college, I answered an ad in the paper, and it said, "Hey, college students, want a great place to do your homework? Want to get paid fairly well to do your homework, like 20 hours a week, 20-hour job. If you can wear a professional outfit, occasionally answer the door, answer phones, and just use the word processor." That's what it was at the time. Dating myself, right? Use the word processor. No one says that anymore. Um, you might have yourself a job. So I answer the paper. It's in Lowell, and I'm like, the street address sounds familiar. Like I've been to. I wonder what company it is, right? But this was sort of not sort of. This is pre Google. This was like in the 1990s, right? So you weren't Googling anything, right? So I get there and I look up and it's a freaking funeral home. Like, yo, what kind of ad is this? And I'm thinking about it, like, this can't be right. So I knock on the door and I'm like, hey, it says 14 Highland Ave. I see that this is 14, but you got a bunch of other little buildings and stuff. They're like, oh, yeah, yeah, come in the back. You here for the job? I was like, yeah. So I go to the back and it's like this detached, well, sort of attached building that has like a connector to it. And I'm like, what is going on here? This cannot be right. But they know who I am. So I get in there and they're like, yeah, it's an office job in the funeral home, but not really in the funeral home, kind of like the back room where we do all the business. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, hell's no. Right? So I'm like, I am not working in a funeral home. But then he explains it to me, and the guy's making his pitch. And the guy at the time was a guy by the name of Rich who worked there, and John McDonough. Shout out to John McDonough, who's also very social media savvy. Does still a lot on social media. And he became somewhat of a mentor to me. He owns a funeral home. He's the son of the guy who owns a funeral home, and eventually his father did pass away, and he became obviously the outright owner of the funeral home. It's been in the family for generation, right? So this isn't it, like right in my city, and I'm like, I can't have people knowing I'm going to work for a funeral home or whatever. But as it turned out, they needed someone just to answer phones, as the ad said. Just sit there. We'll pay you to do your homework. You're just going to answer the radio, the phone, and again, dating myself, the beeper, the pager, right? And they had all different codes. This was in the day when you had codes, like a row of nines means this, and a row of ones means this. And if you text someone 911, it's obviously you get the idea, right? That was the early precursor of text messages. So they're like, hey, you good with tech? And I was like, yeah, I worked at CB radios and computers and all that kind of stuff. I know what CPU is and DOS and mainframes and blah blah blah. And I knew all the computing languages or whatever. And I'm like, how much you pay? And they said how much they pay. And I was like, yeah, that works. 20 hours. But what's up with the dead people? And they're like, no, 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 you won't really have to deal with the dead people, but you might take a phone call when someone died. So you'd be handling the first call. And I'm like, oh, I knew there was a catch. I'm like, I don't
Right.
really want to do this. But growing up, someone who was uh, Catholic, and my grandfather was Greek Orthodox. So growing up, and my father's side was French Catholic, and my mother's side, they were like a little bit of everything. You know what I'm saying? So it was like the Greek, her dad Greek Orthodox. That was sort of the primary thing in that family. And so you spend your childhood going to Greek Orthodox churches and Catholic churches, and I did. My mother was the only one who didn't go to a, um, a a parochial school in their family, and most of the kids went to Greek schools too, as well, and some of the future and previous generations. And there was a Hellenic school in Lowell that a lot of people went to, and I wanted to go and didn't want to go, and then we moved, so I didn't have the option. Blah blah blah. So taking it up to where we're getting at, my mother was the only one who went to public school, and my mother was probably the least off the religion because of that. I think that's fair to say. And my dad's side, they all went to. My dad went to like St. Joseph's High School, that kind of stuff. And so I did first communion, was baptized, and all that kind of stuff. And then kind of between the Greek Orthodox and all this stuff, I was kind of like non-denominational, right? I had a girlfriend who went to Catholic church, so I went to Catholic church for like another probably 7 years with her, like every Sunday kind of thing. Um, and truth be told, as an adult, really couldn't stand going to church. I was like, this is the worst. This is like watching paint dry, because I was going to Catholic church, right? Which, when you haven't gone to many other churches other than the Greek church, which is like, it feels like Satan is coming through the door. I don't know if you've ever been to a Greek church. And see, a Greek church is not like the traditional churches that you may see on TV. Like, it is very dark. You got the, evil eye going on. You got the priests look like they're satanic. It's just crazy, right? And they're scary. And until it's a Greek festival, then everybody's happy. But it's like, it looks like a horror movie when you go to Greek church. So I was like, I'm good. I think I'm okay. I can do the Sunday thing or whatever. But in my head, I'm like, I find as an adult, now being like 19 years old, I'm finding most of this stuff to be way far out there. I'm like, truth be told, I'm sitting there listening to um, uh, sermons or whatever, from different people. And I'm starting to get into actually being able to hear more people because of the funeral home. And this is where I was going with it. The funeral home, because it's in Lowell, which is incredibly diverse, we have monks that do their funerals at them. And by the way, the McDonoughs are a traditional Irish owned funeral home, but they are the largest funeral home, or number two, or out of like, 35 different funeral homes in Lowell. They're either number one or number two every year, doing 200 funerals a year, which is big numbers, big numbers. And at a clip, even in those days, at like, on an average funeral, bringing in, you're like, somewhere between, $8,000 and $20,000, right? So you do the math. And they had limos, they had insurance, they had pre-services, pre-arrangement. They did a lot of stuff. Their hands in a lot of different cookie jars, right? And the pre-servicing, that's a big deal. Now, in the basement, they had caskets that they showed like a showroom. I was the dude who actually shut down the whole funeral home at night too. So I did end up having to see dead people. I'd have to go into the living room and do all this kind of stuff to shut down. After they had 3 different showing rooms, and there could be 3 dead people out there that I'm shutting down. It's like a scary movie. And my hours were 3 to 9, and 9 o'clock calling hours are 2 to 4 and 7 to 9. Those are the standard calling hours in the Catholic realm. 2 to 4 and 7 to 9 at that place. And so, I'm shutting down unless there's a funeral, or a wake or something. I'm there till like 10 on those nights. And I'm going down the creepy basement in this old house from like the early 1800s, right? That they've owned forever. There's been countless funerals in there. It could not feel more Salem's Lot and dead people coming out anywhere. But the advantage to this job is I did get to do all my homework. I probably made it through college because of this job. And I wrote more rhymes than any human alive in those times because all I did was come in and write rhymes and do my homework. I'd do my homework for, like, truth be told, 30 minutes, a night. And then I would do rap for like 5 hours, like every night. And so my lyrical Burgundy Bible, which is it over there? Nah, somewhere over here. I mean, I started making there. But I started reading every book of theology you could imagine. They had everything on comparative world religion that you could imagine, right? All these kind of books on like faith, the afterlife, all these things that people want to read when they're in a funeral home that basically had a study in it. And so I got to read so much stuff. Now, so by the time I'm 19 and 20, I'm reading all this stuff and I'm going, classic introvert style, right? Working in a funeral home, reading religious text, doing my homework, and writing rhymes. That's what I'm doing. I couldn't be any happier, to be honest. At first, I was so weirded out by this, but I'm like, I can't be more happy. But I got to the point where I was like, um, seeing the commonalities among the religions uh, shocked me, even as diverse as some of these far out there religions were. Like whether we'd have an Indian family come through, or we'd have a Buddhist monk family come through. A lot of Cambodians were monks as well. They come through. We'd see everything you could imagine, right? In Lowell, you'd see African funerals, all kinds of stuff comes through, and you just got used to seeing the commonality. And the commonality of grief is kind of different and it's expressed differently. But at the end of the day, people are either trying to celebrate or they're sad, right? It's one of the two. People are trying to, some cultures celebrate it. It's a wonderful thing. Other people really mourn and like obviously like you've lost a loved person, right? But the commonalities that were found through the religions and through the funerals really blew my mind. So I just started reading more, and trying to dissect what is it, almost like a research project that was unsanctioned. What is the commonality through all the religions? And the storytelling, and this is where we get into the creative part, the storytelling is amazing. The storytelling across the religions is just unbelievably amazing. And I did, unlike many people, have a chance to read the entire Bible from working at the funeral home, which was many nights I'd fall asleep reading the Bible. I'd be in there, they'd be like, "Oh, he's reading the Bible again," book of Numbers. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, are you serious? Have you tried to read the book of Numbers? Have you tried to read Deuteronomy like in its entirety, right? Let alone the incredibly fantastic stuff, book of Revelations." But you need a translator. You need a guy. So I have all these other books and I'm trying to translate and figure out what this stuff is, just going through it, not from a theological aspect, sort of more from a philosophical aspect of just like in this cultural awareness of what's going on. And what I came up with is obviously the golden rule reigns supreme in every single religion. Every religion that's out there has some version of the golden rule, and the 10 commandments are relatively consistent. There is some sort of facsimile with most of the 10 commandments, as there are in our laws. I mean, we talk about the Code of Hammurabi, also has very similar, with more extreme punishment, of course, but very similar things that thou shalt not do, right? And so when I'm thinking about what set of rules would you make if you were in charge, or what things would you say are non-negotiable, and then what's your appreciation for the festivity, the arts? Because the Catholic Church, I'm just going to say, it sucks. It's the worst thing ever when it comes to music and creativity. It's unbelievably bad. It's like they try to be as boring as humanly possible and scare everyone out the door. And when you see other churches and other religions, it's like, sign me up. Get me out of this. This is
Right.
awful. Why? How can anyone remain Catholic? The only thing I can think is that the very provincial kind of people that are in the Northeast, where I'm from, you can live your whole entire life in the same city, go to the same church. And what's the probability? Here's a great question for you, too. And I know I need to shut up because I'm going on forever. What's the probability that you were born into the correct religion? And then ask yourself, were you born into the same religion as your parents? And are you still the same religion as your parents? And what's the probability that they had it right? Like, in other words, if you could pick from all the other religions, and we didn't even start talking about it, but like, you might say there's 20 plus pretty major religions out there, right? If you're going to read them all objectively, which one appeals to your sense of the arts the most, right? Let's forget about the truth value, but which one appeals to your sense of the arts the most, right? Which one would you hope that you landed in, just from a creative aspect? I find this a very interesting question. And then, you know, should we not be looking to switch what it is that we're born into, or at least open ourselves up? Because just like living in Boston, you can live in the same city forever, go to the same church forever, and you might get a very narrow slice of the pie. But I find most people are willing to argue for the rest of their life that it's their religion that is the right one, that got it right, and everybody else is bat crazy. Right? And it's like, when you look at the others, are there some things that you go, man, I wish we had that? Or where is the facsimile to that in our religion that I'm just not getting? So these are some of the things that were on my mind. And across the board, I see a very absent God in terms of places where God can have his quote unquote or her voice front and center. We're going to take Jesus out of the equation, right? We'll take that out of the equation and say across the board, other religions that don't have a manifestation, because it's kind of hard because only really Christianity has a manifestation of that physical person walking around. But when you look at the other religions, it's like it seems like God is much more better with creating everything. Like I'll create the world, I'll create the flowers, I'll create the oceans, I'll create everything there is, but I don't really want to be the one leading the conversation. So I'm interested in your take on that because I know that could be debated in many different ways, and I know I've thrown a lot out you. So I will shut up and listen to theologian, architect, musician Bernard Hankins.
Well, it's funny you say architect because we're going to talk about that. But okay, so social introvert, creative extrovert. I'm still not 100% sure. Is that the final two questions you asked? Does that tie into the title? Is that the main theme? I just want to make sure I got the question right because, yeah, like you said, I can't hear you now.
Sorry, I'm dealing with the echo. I think the more of it's more of a statement for me
Right.
because I'm kind of thinking, yeah, it seems to me that God is following the blueprint that we've made for the show. Like it seems like and it depends. There's so much. It's such a loaded thing. It's so much. It's like I try to be aware, if nothing else, from the story of the funeral home. I try to not. You heard me say this before. I not try to say like my God. I try not to do like the God. Like I try to be whatever you want to call it, higher power for people. But I try not to just have it so self-centered. It's like from the God I grew up on. It doesn't necessarily have to be the God, even though we're going to want to claim everybody would claim that. So just say whoever your God is. It seems across the board that God seems to be very social introvert for me and creative extrovert, and definitely today, um, because there's not, we don't have. There's a lot of religions where God hasn't really shown his quote unquote face the same way that he would do many times before. In many religions, you have examples of God's doing X, God's doing Y, God's doing Z, and it's like that was burning bush. We're going to say that was God. You know what I mean? So it's like we don't have many burning bushes right now. We don't have many. I'm trying to think of other religion examples, but it
Right.
seems like God would rather play the cut or talk more when there's not a big audience,
Play the
and
cut.
like and do works through others. Like let me.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so let me leave it there.
All right. Well, so much to cover, but okay. First, let me see where do I start. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of groups out there that popped up. Maybe they've been around for a while, but maybe it was like 10 years ago. I started to notice there was a lot of groups who were like Christians, arts. Let's talk about it because there was a lot of emphasis on why do Christians have this question about, am I a Christian who is an artist? Am I an artist who is Christian? How do I, integrate these two? So then there's this book called Addicted to Mediocrity. This guy talks with Frankie Schaefer. He talks a lot about this. And then well, the reason I thought of those groups is there's a lot of groups they start off very simply like, look at what God did in the beginning. In the beginning, like you put in the description, in the beginning, God created. It's like the first thing we learn about God is He's creator. So a lot of arts groups that I've been to, they emphasize. It seems to me that that's important because that's the first thing we see about God. So we should think about that. Like we're made in God's image. And so what does that say about us? Well, look what He did to Adam. Adam named the animals. So obviously a creative person is going to tune into that because like, yeah, exactly. God is creative, especially when you go to a church or, a very scientific heavy culture where people are not emphasizing creativity. You're like, nah, but look, the Bible, like, look, God's first thing. So I throw that out there. It's interesting you said, yeah. I mean, I'm very much like you right now. Like I'm literally just going church to church. Like, okay, this is boring. This is boring. Like I've been bored in church since I was young too. I was like, okay, this is boring. This is boring. Um, and it doesn't make sense. Like it really doesn't make sense. Like this documentary I saw, he said, man, like church is supposed to be about God, the universe, like atoms, solar systems. He's like, we're supposed to be able to come bring the deep questions. He said, but I'm bored out of my mind. He's like, church is just like shallow place. I was like, yeah, I get it. It's just like this thing people go and they sing a song and they get a sermon. It's all right, time to go to lunch. Okay, now back to going home watching football. But it's interesting studying architecture, and I'm gonna share a screen in a minute. we studied all these different time periods, and one of the defining, I can't remember which period it was. Maybe it was Rococo period or Baroque. They were like, when you walk into a church, you should feel dwarfed. Like you're supposed to walk into that church, and the architecture is supposed to be like you are nothing. So you look up at the ceiling, and you're like, oh my goodness, yes, God is big, God is massive. And so they would put a lot of emphasis on the architecture and how grandiose. I like studying the Rococo period because they called it like gaudy, like there was just like so much detail and ornate. They were like, put it all in there, just like no holding back. And then you get to these minimalist periods, and you're like, oh, yeah, this is not. I mean, think about all churches now. Everything is like a box, Walmart. Like you go into a church, straight lines. I mean, and I think that's part of the modern culture too, because in our architecture program, if you put a curve in your design, they were like, wait, what is this curve about? You have to really justify it hard. So like
Right.
we've left a curve for the line. You know, everything's about linear logic. We talked about the age of reason or enlightenment. One of those two was like it went from aesthetic beauty to the column's proportion, the rationality of the proportion. That's the beauty. It's beautiful rationally to my mind because it makes mathematical sense. But okay, so one of my favorite architects, we probably talked about him before, Antonio Gaudi. This
Yep.
dude, Catholic. Okay, maybe this will restore your faith in Catholicism. Sagrada Familia. All right, can you see my screen? All right, Sagrada Familia. Like this church is in Barcelona. Ridiculous. Gaudi, he was like, yo, God doesn't have any lines in nature. Like, why are we doing lines? Like, why are we going against God's original design? And he had this osteomorphic architecture because he liked to mimic bones and trees. So you're supposed to feel like you're in a forest. And this church is still being built. It's like 119 years in process, still being built to this day, even though he's died. But when you go in this church, like I want to go here. This would make me travel. I don't really want to travel, but I would go here to see this because this is ridiculous. Like this dude was intent on detail. He was hoisting people up to get them plastered proportionally. He was hoisting cows up. People were passing out. They're like, all right, Gaudi, you got to chill. Like people are dying. Like people are nearly dying for your work. He's like, yeah, because he's like, I'm real. I mean, you just go to just the front of the church is ridiculous. Just like the whole nativity thing is sculpted in the front when you walk in. So yeah, when I think about something like Gaudi, I'm like, yo, this is what church should be like. Creativity, breathtaking. It should be a thing where you walk into the place and the creativity itself blows you away, whether it's architecture, whether it's music, whether it's painting, whether it's design. I feel like a lot of people they think of church as just this. Like I went to a church this morning and it was like, yeah, hymns, and it was the lesson. And I was like, okay, I came here because I'm trying to find something, but I knew it was gonna pretty much be the same thing. Yeah, I know you said you had to get a cord, so I don't know how much you've heard of Pro is missing my whole lecture. He had to go get a cord, so I'm going to recap everything now. Let's let him get back plugged in. It's like being in school again, where nobody listens to your lesson. You're up there giving your heart and soul, and then they're just not in the room.
Sorry, losing some power here. So everything was about to shut down if I didn't get that wire straight.
All right, so I don't know. I see. I was just going. Recap. I was saying, if you look at the Gaudi Church, I don't know which part you heard or which part you left.
The Gaudi Church part, but I didn't hear the end.
I was saying, like, yeah, he just, you see something like Gaudi's church, it's inspiring. And he's basically saying, like, God is the blueprint. He's like, right. I'm taking my cue from God and I'm putting it into the architecture. But when you walk into a church like Gaudi, like, I want to go there in person. Just like the outside, outside the outside. Then I saw a video of the inside. I never knew it had like this, beautiful rainbow stained glass. It's just ridiculous. Looking up at the ceiling. So yeah, he was Catholic. So maybe that restore your faith in Catholicism. He was, no. He was engineering, like he was innovative with it, like the structure itself. Like he was innovating the structure itself to be able to hold up his designs. Like I said, still I think it's like 120 years or something still in the making, still being built after his death. There was this guy who was a monk who was sculpting on it, and he was like, "Yo, I'm inspired by Gaudi. I had to become a Catholic." This dude converted to Catholicism because of Gaudi's passion. He's like, I can't be Buddhist and work on this Catholic church. He's like, I got to become as Gaudi. I was like, now that's how you inspire somebody to convert, like your passion. But yeah, you go to church nowadays. Like I went to church this morning. It was him. It was a sermon. It was like, okay. I personally think church should look more like modern society. Most people would disagree with that. I think you should walk into church. It should be architecture. It should be graphic design. It should be graffiti. It should be music. It should be like breakdancing. Did you ever see that video of people breakdancing for the Pope? Yeah, you should be like people think all this stuff is sacrilegious. It's like, no, oh, I actually should perform this poem. Should I do this poem today? I got this poem, it's perfect, but um people think this here's the problem, right? Here's the problem. People have a vision of current society in their mind, and then they have a vision of what they think religion is, and those two clash. That's why if somebody said like there's this meme out there and it's like, I never knew Jesus had a Honda because he had this verse. He said, I did not come of my own accord. So everybody laughs because it's like, oh, Jesus, he's old and religious and archaic. And this is new modern technology. Like people think religion and technology are at odds. So if you make some kind of joke about modern aesthetics and religious aesthetics, it's supposed to be funny because like one is so old and out of date and one is so new. And so if you try to tell people like, no, church should be modern, it should be technological, it should be interesting, people just can't like get away from the tradition and the nostalgia. But that's exactly why people don't come to church. I'm not saying they should come for the technology, like you
Yeah.
should come for God, but God is the one who's like you're saying, God is the one who's given us the minds of creativity. And I think he would want us to like glorify him with all possible ways to glorify him. Like literally just singing only, conversation only. I was like, what do you think it's gonna be like when you get to heaven? You think we're just gonna be singing hymns? And I say the same thing to you. Like the deacon at our church used to be like, every day is gonna be like Sunday when we get to heaven. I was like, please no. I was like, I'm not saying I want to go to hell, but this is pretty boring. Like if you're telling me every day is gonna be like Sunday service, I'm gonna be miserable because I am bored out of my mind. Hymns, contemporary music, people think that church has a sound. I was like, no, that's the sound you guys have created. But all the genres of music that exist should be in the church. And that's why you don't have people come to church, because people like, you think people be listening to hymns when they're at work? Some people, but no, people be listening to techno, electronica,
Yeah.
bluegrass. I mean, it's just there's a lot. But all right, but I'll go with what you got for now.
I find the people that are listening to him are people that think they're getting more glory from God. Like you're somehow gaining extra points. Like there's no way
Right.
you like hymns. I mean, it's like
There's no way you like him.
you just don't. What up, Tree? I wasn't seeing a lot of the comments coming through, so I was putting them through there. So good to see you in there. Yeah, it's man, it's so much, just so rich. So when I went by Lord Plord, right, for a long time, and so much of the stuff that I did was like, stuff that I was reading, and a lot of religious overtones and stuff, and people would be like blasphemous. I was like, blasphemous? Aren't we all son of God? Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like Jesus just got it on a deeper level. I used to just say, right, would be my big thing. I was like, he just took it for what it really was, and really ran with that, because the metaphor itself, like if we want to talk about the biggest criticism to Christianity by other religions, is even within Judaism, is that it seems almost hypocritical to say Jesus is, oh, we get to have Jesus, like we get to have Superman, right? We get the embodiment of a human who's also God but is son of. Nobody understands that. I don't care who the theologian is, nobody understands. People make pretend with their words that they understand that, but you can't square that circle very well. I don't care how versed you are, I don't buy it. I don't buy that you can square that circle very well, which is the problem that the Jews have, right? I understand the interpretations. I understand everything we can look at from a son and blood of David all the way down. Like I'm fairly well versed on trying to make it work. And I say when I go into a lot of these rooms, especially the atheism rooms, I go in there and I say, look, I am not a Christian apologist. I am a Christian attempter. Like I'm trying to make Christianity work for me as much as I can because I'm rooting for it to be true. right? But I have a lot of massive objections that strike me on a logical level as complete BS in certain situations that have never been rectified because human flaw has got in. I've never been one to say the unfallible word. Like, to me it's ridiculous that we can expect a bunch of imperfect humans to suddenly be perfect now when it comes to interpreting, translating, keeping secure. We know the story. Most people know the stories of what became canon, what did not, the trials and tribulations before the printing press, before Gutenberg, the fallacy of humans, even when they spread a message in a room. We've all played that game, right? And I'm supposed to believe that the translation is perfect and that it makes perfect sense. What works better for me as a person who's trying to find it to be true, right? Like I always say, I'm rooting for God, but there's a lot of problems that I have. I say, like, quantum mechanics is your best option. It always is. It's your best option to go. And quantum mechanic people who are into quantum mechanics hate when people do what I'm about to do, which is like, well, you could interpret that as God, and they're like, no, because many of them are just hardcore atheists, and they're like, nope. You used the words earlier where you said, well, I don't actually. I'll probably misquote the words, so I shouldn't say the words, but I think your point was, you were talking. Let me think how you said it. You said, let me not start with you said. When the scientists get mad, what they do is they go, oh, you cannot have it be where there's middle ground, right? You were talking about like middle ground or common ground. I forget how you said it, but it's like, or interpretation or what have you. They would be like, no, there is no interpretation. You're just screwing it up, right? They'd be like, there is no overlap where religion and science comes in. They'd be like, it just doesn't exist. I always find myself saying it to where there's common ground. And they're like, no, there can't be, right? Like, it can't possibly be that there's any common area in the Venn diagram. I'm the opposite. I say there are some problems where there's an overlap that you can't square. So,
Right.
for instance, one of them is heaven. There's some problems inherently with heaven just in terms of the logical, unless you take it to quantum mechanics.
Right.
Here's where we go, right? Like, if the love of my life doesn't love me and got remarried, right? It's like, am I going to see her? Is she going to see me? How does that work? But you know where that does work? That works in the Heisenberg uncertainty principle in quantum mechanics. It works that, and we're starting to see it in science. More people are coming around on this idea that there is no objective reality, right? It's that the entire thing is subjective, and that there have even been tests done in quantum. One is relatively new as last year, which is sort of squaring that circle, which is like, I can register this reading, you register this reading over here, and they're both valid and they're both happening in different, like, we just use the word dimensions. So for me, my reality, I'm getting a reading over here. I don't want to get into the quantum part. I'm trying to avoid the words, as you can probably tell, but let's just do spin up, right? I'm getting spin up. You're getting spin down. You've
Right.
measured them with the exact same specifications I have, but that's just what quantum does, right? And we've now verified this, that two equal realities are totally different, right? And so maybe there's a way that could happen, but you can't just sit around and make the argument. I'm not saying you or me. I'm just saying you can't fight hard for things unless you're armed with different facts, and I'm always open to hear them. Then
Right.
I'm playing. Like, how do you fight the fight? That one, that logical thing, it's like in me, but the greatest place for me to be in heaven would be with like these people who think I suck. They want nothing to do with me. Like, and we always, I never feel good when I just have to go, well, you just have to take it on face value that it can work, or there's some mystery to the universe that we don't know. Well, if there is, my faith's not strong enough to be okay to just say, okay, I'm going to accept that 100%. I don't
Right.
feel good about that. I want to know. I don't believe we're like this weakling group of humans that can't think or whatever, or that everything that we don't understand is just like, well, you weren't made to get that. But yet we forget, over the last 300 years, the things that we figured out are those subset of things that people said, well, humans will just never understand that. And look, here we are, we understand. So I'm like, don't give me that. Give me a
Right.
rationale that makes sense for the senseless. And if you don't have it, well, let's look to the realm of where the senseless actually exist. And that's in quantum. And so it's like, I like quantum as a champion for what may be possible, where it seems everything that is illogical or impossible or a fallacy is dwelling, and I don't
Right.
like the games that people play in some philosophy rooms where they go, so God is all powerful. Can there be a not all powerful God? I mean, like these kind, they try to get you in these sort of paradoxes, right? And paradoxes are more like word salad games. And, I think, when you start doing that stuff. So if God's all powerful, how can there be an unpowerful God? Well, dude, when you look at the creation story, when we look at the origins of creativity, when we think about the very beginning of, and that's kind of what I was going with the beginning here, is what we were talking about in the beginning. It's like, the Bible is flooded with innovation, creativity. Not always saying that innovation, for me, anyways, this is my interpretation, is that I love the creativity, I love the innovation, I love the poetry, I love the I don't know what else to say about it. I mean, I love that. And every now and then I'll just find something that goes, yeah, but wait a minute, this doesn't work. And I'm truthful about it. I don't just go, no, it has to work because this is what I believe and what I was raised on. No, I say, this is a problem for me. Give me the answer. And
Right.
there's a lot of times people just try to con me into the answer. And I'm like, no, you just did more harm than good. Like, give me something that sits with me so that I can
Right.
praise what is praising over here. Because otherwise I say, well, there's some inconsistencies and I have to acknowledge it. And so, when I go back to um, uh, these conversations that I'll have a lot of times, I'll say, hey, can't we just talk about like how wonderfully the universe has been created? And it's equally as crazy for you to suggest that it has no cause as it is for someone else to say that, there's, like, in other words, combating the atheist, basically. Combating the atheist is like, it's as equally preposterous for you to think that there's no rhyme or reason for all of this as it is
Right.
for someone to say, well, there's just an instantaneous one creation and that thing is God and it's all powerful. So
Right.
when people argue with that stuff, I'm like, bro, can't you see the other side of that argument is completely just flipped on its head, and you're just arguing for it because that's how you come up. But the common ground
Right.
for me, and that's the word I think you used earlier, the phrase, the common ground is there has been something amazing that has given birth to us. It has given birth to everything there is. The creation that's in the universe, the creativity of life itself is unbelievable and undeniable. And I just think when you deny it because it sounds too goddish for some people,
Right.
then you're just cutting yourself off from reality. I think, but there's so
There's
much,
yeah.
so
Yeah. I'm
much.
I'm just trying to figure out because I really there's so many things I could answer, but also I'm just excited about talking about the creative extrovert part of this topic. I guess to your point, isn't I write a lot of poems about this actually, where I talk about science and creation, and the main theme that comes out is the Bible for a lot of people is too story and narrative. It's almost like once personality is introduced, people are, oh, okay, I'm out. Like I'm out. It's like it's interesting. Like as soon as you say there is a personhood involved in the universe, people are like, what are you talking about? How
How
could there
can
be
there be?
conscious?
Right,
How could there
right,
be
right, right.
consciousness? And it's interesting. I was thinking about something this week, and I started working on a poem about this. Actually, I should just read part of it.
Mm.
This was just kind of like the
What?
scribblings of it this
Get some
morning.
poetry from Bernard. What?
This is just like the idea was there, so I just started typing out the idea, but it kind of started to uh come together a little bit. But this is obviously not the final. This is called abiogenesis. So it's people come home from work giving thanks for spontaneous creation. Netflix, Spotify, no creator. They're artist atheists. They just exist. They refuse to be creationists. Intelligent design, irrelevant to the times. Something about irreverent minds. There are no creators, no actors, just waiters. We made ourselves. The paintings on the walls, the sculptures on the shelves, music in the cars, movies on our homes, stories in our stores, content on our phones. Something about the album, listen, no intelligent design, but artificial algorithm AI. Artificial intelligent. Art is not design. Scrape the cyberscape. Internet is the omniscient mind. So I was playing with this idea about
Mm.
like
Yes, you
is
were.
huh?
Yes, you were. Yes, you were.
The idea is like when you think about culture that we live in now, there's a sense that it's not actual, but it's the perception. It's like, oh, I come home, there's just this content that's waiting for me. I just click on play and it's there. It's like someone created that. Like, I get it. It's so abundant now that it just feels like it's always been there. Oh, I can just stream this movie and I can stream this song, and this stuff is just here for my taking. It was like there was literally a person who sat down with a pen, who put words in order, then edited it, and then uploaded it for your benefit. And I was like, that's interesting because that's like a micro reflection of how people think of the universe. It's like there's no creator. This whole world is just here. Like, it's just here for me. So it's very interesting how
Right.
culturally, on a micro level, people's ideas about creativity and
Right.
creators and creation is reflective of their macro understanding of how they got here. I'm just here. Look at my body.
That's deep. Yeah, I like that.
Like as interesting and complex as my body is and the universe and how everything works, it's just here. I can just stream the universe. And it's like,
Well,
well, let me just say this last thing.
yeah,
Because I mean, people have used this argument many a times. It's like, oh, if you came to my house and you saw a painting, and I said, yeah, man, just cool. I came home and it was there. It just painted itself. You'd be like, haha, funny, Bernard. Always jokes. No, for real. Like, this thing painted itself.
right.
Like, if I sat there and seriously told you that a painting created itself before I got home, you say, okay, Bernard, we're not going to be friends anymore because, like, you're. What are you saying to me? You don't make any sense.
Right.
But then when I look at the entirety of the universe, and I was like, yeah, I would say the same thing. You're right. There should be a creator. Is like, what are you? Are
Right.
you crazy? There's no.
Right.
I'm like, I don't understand how you make these
No, there's
connections.
not.
Then.
Me either. So that's it. That's the crux of it right there. And these are the kind of conversations that I wish existed more in Clubhouse, but they deform and de-evolve into people just shouting each other's points, right? And that's the problem with Clubhouse. It has so much potential. There's only one topic to me that really matters on both of these things, and it's what you're hitting on. But again, my mind races off at light speed too, so it's hard to grab it because it's trying to run away. But and by the way, that you have to continue on that poem because that was amazing. The just even the ideas and the dichotomy that's set up there is amazing. Um, I have never liked as a scientist, and I've called myself a scientist since like fifth grade. I have never liked as a scientist the bad definition of energy. Energy has an awful definition, and so does technology. Essentially, the definition we're getting. What's the definition you think of when you think of energy? Maybe the school definition. Do you have one that pops in your head, or maybe it's just me? It's so cheesy. Yeah, because it's so cheesy. That's why you don't. The ability to do work, right? That's in all the textbooks. The ability to do work. And technology essentially is the same thing, right? Technology, energy, right? It's like we know what we mean when we say technology, but you love getting at the root of the words, right? And it's like when you think about like energy, and I'm not even talking about the root of the word. I'm just thinking like energy is what's behind everything we're talking about, right? There's this energy. We always come back to this word energy, and it's the most loosey goosey word that we don't even know what we mean by energy. When we say there's a release of energy, try to get someone to pinpoint the definition of energy for you really on a deep level. Good luck. You're going to be fumbling with that one for a while, right? And technology is kind of another thing that's hard to pin down. We know it's like something that makes doing that work easier, right? That's generally what we mean. So technology and energy go hand in hand. And, we talk about energy, E equals MC squared. Most people know the E is the energy. And when we have lessons on what the MC squared means, it can go awry real quickly too, because there's another loosey goosey piece in there too. It's like we talk about mass, right? Mass is an incredibly hard thing to pinpoint too, because you get into the wave particle duality of the universe, which quickly evolves into a physics conversation. And it's very difficult to pinpoint what we mean by wave and particle. Most people think a particle is a ripple at a location in space-time. That we say it's here right now. And that ripple has created the point, right? That's emerged through the ether, if you will, and it's now taken particle appearance as opposed to wave just kind of being everywhere. Wave is the closest thing to energy, spirit, right? Whatever you want, like energy, spirit, sound, right? They're all kind of the ether. It's the soup, if you will, that's out there that we don't really know much about. So we use big words for them, but we really don't have much about. We can get into electromagnetism, which I understand it has really, really evolved as a topic, and people can do wonderful dissertations on everything that there is to know about wave particle duality, electromagnetism, that talking about the four fundamental forces in the universe, with electromagnetism being the one that's going to grab the most attention, because you're talking about electricity and magnets. It's like magnets are mind-blowing, but yet we feel the need to ascribe a scientific rationale to all of these things, which we don't have. Like, we don't have an explanation that feels good to why there just is that stuff. We have no idea. We're like, well, it seems to be this, all we have is theory, and I don't mean theory in the scientific sense, just like loose conjecture of, what started it all. Like, scientists will agree with stunning accuracy when the Big Bang happened, right? Well, we can all give you the almost 14 billion years ago response, right? Within 100 to 200 million years of 14 billion years, we know we can actually get it down with stunning accuracy of when that happened, but we have no idea what did it. Like, we have no idea. And that's where you say, okay, well, the theologist might have a claim here, and the physicist might have a claim here that might be the same claim. But we're talking about this primordial soup that we don't understand. And when we talk about waves, we talk about that ether, we talk about points, particles, if you will, that give rise to mass. And I know I could be saying that in reverse, because some people will say that it is mass that gives rise to the particle, which is weird. But or gives, and we can vice versa do the same kind of thing with gravity. I should say we could bring gravity into the equation, pun intended, and things get messy. I don't want to really go all that down that way either. But what I will say with all of this sort of soup is that the argument fundamentally comes down to which sits better with you. That there is an all-powerful creator behind the scenes, a Wizard of Oz, if you will, right? Who is not a fake, though, because we wouldn't be talking about it if we believed the Wizard of Oz was a fake. We believe the real thing, the real Wizard of Oz, right? Behind the scenes, the Geppetto, if you will, pulling the strings, making it happen. But we have, and it's funny, I started watching Pinocchio to take that metaphor a little bit more. There was the blue fairy that comes in. I'm always waiting in the mystical magic show for kids. What is going to be the magic potion that makes the magic happen? And we never really know. It's always vague. It's always like the blue fairy comes in, right? And how did that happen? You wished upon a star. And so we always go to the space. We always go to the realm where magic seems to play the most, which is space and science that we don't fully understand, right? Also home of the heavens in most metaphorical senses, right? So we're giving the science and we're giving the space and the science and sort of the spirituality realm the same playground. But yet we say, no, these two couldn't possibly go together. But both of these are fundamentally perplexing. How could it be that something all-powerful just popped into existence? And by the way, I'm not asking you to answer this because no one has the answer, right? Or how could it be the opposite? And what you get is you get the fundamental doorway through which the hardcore atheist or the hardcore theist has to walk through, that are equally perplexing and weird. The fact that you believe there's an all-powerful being behind the scenes that is in control of all the energy, in control of all the power, and maybe different religions argue about whether that person is still in power, whether that person's a person, whether that person's alive, whether that person's embedded into the fabric, that energy is God. You have all these different kind of arguments that are plausible, because the difficult question of saying, how could this all come into play from evolution simply doesn't seem very satisfying. Because at the same point, you still have to ask the question, well, where did that come from? What begat the first instance? So we're at the same stumbling block, yet everyone argues with this fervor as if they're right and that they got the right answer. Usually based on something that's 14.8 billion years into the future. 13.8 more billion years of knowledge into the future that they're arguing from, without the slightest comprehension of truly how long that time frame is. So if you wanted, and I'll try to wrap this up, if you wanted to argue that evolution and all that kind of stuff was possible, we first have to acknowledge that we don't have a great grip on time. We don't have a great grip on even some of the basics that Einstein has proposed about 100 years ago with E equals MC squared, and understanding how things can be relative, which is really what I'm arguing with some of the science we're talking about in quantum, of how you can have two people having two totally different realities measuring the same thing. And with all the scientific accuracy and acuteness that you need, and you get two different results, suggesting that there are two or infinite many different realities. If that doesn't sound like the playground of God for you, then you're lying to yourself. You know what I
Right.
mean? And so you're just picking a side. And it
Right.
all comes down to that argument and how you want to slice it. The rest to me is somewhat academic, as they say.
Right. Nah, I mean, there's so much to get into, but yeah, I mean, similar to your point about how does it sit with you. I heard somebody say something once. He was having a debate at a college, and the guy said, "Look, he said, let's quit." He said, "Let's forget about evolution, creation, God." He said, "The bottom line is humans want to do what they want to do." He's like, that's really it. So he said, even if I convinced you there was a God, the question is like, what are you going to do with that question? Like, are you going to change your life? Because if you don't want there to be a God, then you're going to be like, nah, I'm gonna suppress that, deny
Right.
that. So it
Yeah.
really doesn't matter. Like, I like that. I like it. Like, it's not creation, evolution. It's really your heart. I mean, that's what the Bible harps on. It's
Mhm.
like, yo, check yourself. You don't like what you're reading right now because I'm making you think about some stuff, and you're like, oh yeah, I don't like this book. Turn the page. Turn. So I really stopped arguing with people because I'm like, oh right, you don't want to be convinced because it's inconvenient to your lifestyle. Um, and so I think, yeah, if people want to find the truth, if they're really open to the truth, then they'll be like, oh, no, tell me more about that. Cause yeah, I do want to know. But if you are already opposed to the truth, you're going to try to argue your way into whatever your belief is, no matter how ridiculous it might be. But okay, so
Right.
here's what I want to go to. Like, okay, so the word creation is very interesting. Like, it has so many connotations. Creationist usually has a negative connotation. Oh, you're a creationist. Oh, yeah, right. Um, but it was interesting when I read certain books on space and cosmology. I found it interesting how even scientists were referring to it as creation, and I was like, oh wow, you guys are using the word creation too. Interesting, interesting. But I
Right, right,
guess
right.
you can use the word creation in the most benign sense of the word, like it is a created thing. Um, did Pro leave? What happened to Pro? Well, I guess I'll keep going while Pro is.
Yeah, sorry, I just have to take my camera off for a sec.
Oh, okay. So you can talk about creation, and it's just like, oh, this is the creation of whatever process, whether you believe in God or not God, right? So I thought that was interesting.
Absolutely.
But so I started thinking more about the word creation, creativity, creative. So I recorded something a while ago called what is the difference between creation and creative? And so I come to the conclusion that I think we all create. Like every day by breathing, you create. You write a letter, that's create. You can create chaos and you can create trash. You can throw something on your floor in your room and it's like, oh, you created a mess. So I think the act of purely just making things exist when they didn't is creation. I think creative and creativity is more related to your personal and unique expression of you. So if I heard a pro lyrical rap, I was like, whoa, that's really creative. I wouldn't say, wow, that's a creation, or man, you created something. I would say, wow, that's creative. Like there's something about the "ive" part of it that means you did something I couldn't do, or you did something very special that's unlike anyone else. So I think the creative part speaks very much to person, consciousness, human being. I think that's where we really get into discussion of the God question. Because I think when you talk about a creator who is creative, it speaks of personal expression. And that as humans, that's the thing that we all want to be here for, right? When somebody does something amazing, we're like, oh, I'm so glad I could experience that. I'm so glad I could see that. When someone simply creates something, we're like, oh, cool, that's nice. Yeah, great. But you're not impressed. So I think the idea that, to the social introvert, creative extrovert, I think when we start talking about just the idea of creative and creativity, you have to link that to the idea of story, narrative, a person. Like, who cares about a story if it's not about a person, right? When you go to the movies and you hear the narrator, the narrative, and they start talking about long, long ago in a world, you're hoping at some point there's going to be a person, right? I mean, you don't hear a long, long ago there was a tree and the tree sat there for thousands of years and the tree grew. And then after the tree grew, grass grew. Eventually your mind is like, okay, where are the people? Like, where are the people? Sure, maybe every now and then you might watch a movie that's just about an object or a thing. But even if you're watching it, you're projecting personification onto it, right? You're thinking, what if I was that tree? I wonder what it'd be like. Like we were talking about this the other day. Like if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound if nobody's there to observe it? A life that has no observer doesn't really matter. So one thing I always talk about, I came up with this idea called memory man. I was like, imagine if there was a person who was born and they memorized every single human being from the first human to the last human to ever be on earth. They never died. They went around and talked to everybody. Oh, that's Pro, that's Bernard, that's Trina, that's Mike. And so when everyone else dies, memory man or memory woman would be on earth and they could at least go, yeah, that was Bernard. Yeah, that was Pro. If there is no observer to watch your life or watch your story, you have to ask the question. It was like, well, what was the point of my life? Right? If the universe, if the sun explodes in what 5 billion years or what they're saying, if the sun explodes, our earth goes away, and there's no record of my life or your life, and no one to have a recording of it, we have to ask, then why am I even here? Because living a life where you're not remembered makes you feel like it was pointless because you think I want to exist in someone's mind. In order to exist in someone's mind, you would have to hope there is a mind that exists for that to happen. Otherwise, we're all down here wasting time. Like it doesn't matter if you. Last thing I'll say, like if you think about it, if there's no one here to remember you, it doesn't matter if you become successful or not, because guess what? You're gonna die and wither away, right? Like, why does it matter if I become president or lay around in my bed? I might as well take the easiest path of existence then. So if your mom's like, you need to get up and get a job, like, Mom, we're all gonna die, and you're not gonna remember me. I'm not gonna remember you, and no one's gonna remember any of us. So let me just lay here and watch TV because no one's gonna care in 5 billion years anyway.
Only Bernard Hankins could have a theory that rests on IVE. A massive theory that's hinged between the three little letters of IVE, changing the entire meaning of the conversation. But I do feel your point. I do, as interesting as that is. It's funny. It was making me think. I started watching. I was looking for, and again, I talk about this with you, saying movies for me feels like freedom, right? When I get to go to the movies, have a new puppy. The movies is not my future anytime soon. So because of that, I was like, once the puppy starts falling asleep, and she's a great fall asleep on you puppy, I'm like, what could I watch? Let me find a new series, right? So I saw the title of this one thing on Netflix. It's called Black Summer. Does it ring a bell?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So it sounded interesting, right? I'm like, what's that about? It's probably gonna be some race relations in Atlanta or something. I'm like, no, it's not. It's about an apocalyptic scenario. It was just I went to this when you started saying if there's no one to remember you. It's this apocalyptic scenario, and I'm sure some people watching this right now probably watch it. If you haven't, it's strangely addictive, as one of the reviews said for it, right? Something like that. It's like I watched the first episode. It just jumps right in. It doesn't waste. It has no preamble. You don't even know what the real situation is of why it started. And basically, it's zombies. And I'm not a zombie guy. I don't do zombies. I'm not a zombie guy. I've watched like 8 of these things in like 2 days, right? And it's crazy because there's no way to give it away. It's about zombies, and it's this, you don't know. Like there's an apocalyptic thing. I'm thinking, okay, nuclear war. There's some kind of nuclear war thing going on where I don't even know the rules yet. I've watched 8 shows, and it's like they turn into zombies when they get shot. Like a regular human gets shot and is about to die, they turn into a zombie. Or if they get like, I think, really badly stabbed, or if they get bitten by another zombie. And you can kill the zombies, but you got to shoot them really good. Like you got to shoot them like right point blank in the head, like because you shoot them like with a shotgun through the chest, it's not going to kill them. You got to get them like 8 times or hit them with a deadly blow, right? So you're just looking at it, they do such a good job. It's scary how good of a job they do with them running through. And there's this one scene. This is what made me think. This is one interesting scene where this guy's looking for people, and you're trying to find people, but half the people are out to kill you just because they don't trust anybody, and everyone's trying to steal everyone's car, siphon each other's gas, and they're trying to get somewhere else, and we don't really know where they're trying to get and why. And it's like, what is going on? And it's just this endless scene. Just imagine your block you live on if it was suddenly apocalyptic, and they do it so well. And imagine that now there's zombies, and like you're trying to stock up on your ammunition, take what you need. The military's kind of functioning, but they're being overran by the zombies, and they're trying to pretend like they got it all going. There's all kinds of stuff going on. But there's one ill scene where finally this guy can't find anybody else, and he's trying to go to a grocery store to get his food, do everything you would do, right? But he sees a dog, and he's so excited when he sees the dog. He's like, "Hey!" And the dog looks at him, and all of a sudden you're like, "This is really weird." He's just looking at the dog, and the dog does come back into play later. But then the dog just goes up off the street, and they really focus in on the dude, and you can tell he's like sad the dog went away. And it's like he just wanted someone to see him.
Right.
It was like there's someone. It was almost a human. It was like
Right.
there's someone who's unaffected by the thing, and there's someone who can remember me. And it was like it totally. You could see the excitement on. And I was thinking about that. Like, would you be excited to see an animal? You know, getting away from the fact people might want to eat the animal, but like, would you be excited to see? I would. I'd be like, yo, it's a dog. It's normal. It's like, hey, that's cool, right? And it's like someone to remember me, or someone that I remember from regular world. And so much of this, they're out in the woods and there's no one there. And you're thinking, it's like, yeah, does their life matter? Like, you know, is there, it's the tree fall in the woods came up many times for me watching this thing. I'm like, anything they're doing right now that people are turning into zombies, like if there's all zombies, it's like, forget about history, forget about life mattering, like the way that we think, you know, everything just suddenly flies out the window when the world is now zombie world, you know, and houses are getting wrecked and the world's ending and all this stuff. It's a straight up apocalyptic scenario. You just start thinking about it, you're watching the movie and you go, I wonder what's going to matter for them now, because money mattered in the beginning. I'm like, who the heck cares about money anymore? And there's one guy going, I know where the money is. And it's like, bro, money's not going to have any value. Like, you know, the relationship with the animals seemed to have more value, you know, like food, guns, transportation. I don't even know where they're trying to go. And you're just thinking about the despair and the helplessness of like what they're trying to do. Like when your world is upended, what matters? And it's funny how your impact, how you've affected other people comes into play, because you see it in this show too. It's like, man, you better hope you treated some of those people good, because they might save your life for it. You know, like you might be hoping you really. And you said something earlier too that grabbed me. You talked about I forget how you said it, but this is what it made me think. Which, funny, I believe in a nutshell is reality. So like a lot of times it's just what we create, right, from what someone else said or did. It's again our individual realities might be the only thing that is real, and they might be the only thing that's not real, because they don't exist for anybody else except us. So much of this reverberates through science, right? Like we talk about color doesn't really exist; it's in our mind, right? Like I don't mean like like race color, like that color exists, but it's like not going down that path. So like, you know, like there's a lot of social media posts, magenta, the color that's not real, right? And it's true. Like magenta doesn't really have a real place. Our brain sort of fills in and goes, we're going to make that magenta. It's kind of between blue and red, right? We're going to make it this purpley kind of color. It's sort of a mirage, but all colors are a mirage, because the color is something our brain transcribes onto the wavelength pattern, right? Sound, it's the same thing. We all know this. We those of us who think about these things think about it all the time. What thing is real? You know, to quote from Morpheus in the Matrix, like what is real? Like the closest thing to it is touch for me, because it's like sound is something we create, right? We go, oh, we're going to take that wave and we're going to give it a property that we call sound. We're going to take this wave and we're going to give it a property which is in the light spectrum, and we're going to give it color, right? And we're going to take the taste of food in the air, we're going to call that smell, whatever, that's waves going through the air as well, right? We're going to give that a smell property to know good or bad, so that our body picks good and doesn't eat things that'll kill us. That's kind of what's behind taste, right? If you want to think about it, dumb it down. What is taste for? So you eat the good stuff, right? Things that taste good are usually good for you. Things that taste bad will usually kill you. Not always, but it's helpful that poop tastes like poop, because if poop tastes good, we'd probably all be dead. You know what I'm saying? Like, those kind of things. You get into this thing, and the only thing that seems real is like we a lot of us say, I need to touch it. Some people say see it, but we know what we see is an illusion. It very well could be, but what we touch, what we knock on, there's something stopping. Like our hand didn't go through the desk. There's something stopping. It's like it feels like there is something there stopping it. But then again, we go, well, maybe it's a force, because magnets have forces and there's no thing there other than waves, particles, right? Which are, like we just earlier said, things popping into existence and out of existence from a field that is sort of the God's ether playground. And like, why does this one make me stop? Why does this force make me not go there? Maybe the desk is a collection of forces that I interpret as the physical wood desk stopping me, but that's just the reverberation of the impulse that my body feels as the result of touching something that we perceive as solid, which may not be solid. And the crazy part is, again, quantum suggests the same thing, because at the quantum level, there is no physical solid. There's no solid, right? So it's massively mind blowing and mind warping that it's like everything we talk about, it's how, what impact that had for us as the receiver and what impact we made for some other receiver to give what we call real any kind of meaning. It's just so crazy
Right.
when you get down to those levels, and fascinating. And so for anyone to say, you know, X, Y, or Z isn't real, it's like, take it with a grain of salt, you know?
Yeah, you're getting into the questions. Because it's funny. I was literally thinking about today as I was taking my walk today. I was just looking at, okay, trees, the cars, the concrete ground, the airplane flying over me, and I was like, if there was another person here right now, there would be a sense of agreement. Like, hey, you see that plane? Yes, I see that plane. Hey, you see that? Like, there's a sense where there's this external world that we all kind of agree is happening to all of us. And we just assume, yeah, we're all talking about the same thing, kind of like to your thing earlier, like, oh, I was observing this, I was observing this. But on a daily basis, on a mundane daily basis, most people just accept there are common things that we're all experiencing and don't really question them. But then, you know me, I go to the next level. I was like, okay. I was like, well, the only reason these cars and these apartments and these trees, well, not the trees, but these cars, these apartments, and the concrete is here is because somebody discovered concrete, decided, like, the first person to the thing was just able to make the thing exist as we know it. Like, somebody else could have invented something called bondcrete, you know, and another
Right.
version of this earth, it would be called bondcrete, and it could be red. And we'd be like, oh, look at the
Right.
bondcrete ground. It's like, yeah, but those things are human created. So, like, we could at least agree that the earth, you know, dirt, trees, sky, clouds, like, okay, we're all experiencing that because that's the creation by God. But all this other stuff is like a virtual reality, so to speak. And that's why I'm always telling people, like, you talk about this world around you like it's true reality. Like, oh, you got to pay your bills and you got to get this kind of regular job. I was like, no, you created that system. That is literally someone's imagination who made apartments, rent, economics. Yeah, they're real to us now in that they affect us, but they're not real like gravity. You know, it's not a law. Like, you could not break the law of gravity. I can't be like, okay, I'm going to jump off this building. It's not going to affect me. No, you're going to die. Like, you're literally going to hit the ground and die because gravity's like, hey, I operate on your body just like I operate on that bowling ball. You're not exempt. But I could.
I say gravity is the biggest killer in the history of mankind. Gravity is responsible for most of the deaths.
But if I go into the work, the social introvert environment or the creative extrovert environment, oh, you got to do things this way. You got to, it's like, no, you have to do things that way because that's what you've decided. That's your perception. You perceive when you walk into a room, I got to say hello to this person. I got to greet this person. No. Those are rules. Those are social rules. Those are created rules. Those are not real. Like, you may operate by them and you may think, oh, this guy should be operating by them, but I don't. I have my own set of rules up here. I was like, oh,
Right.
I'm going to talk to this guy. I'm going to talk to this girl. I'm going to go get this job that people say I can't have. I'm going to create this song that people say, why would you make that? It's not going to make any money. Like, I'm literally allowed to do whatever I want. So I think for me, I would say the only thing you can really know is truth, because that's internal, and internal truth can only be verified by you. So when I told a friend this one time. I said, how do you know something is true? I said, well, if you thought a thought inside your head and then someone else came to you and verified that same thought without you ever having told them, you'd be like, whoa, how did you get inside my head? Like, it's like there's this self-contained experience that I have that no one else has access to but me. And so I'm the only person who can say whether it resonates. Now, people say, oh, well, that's what's called subjectivity or that's called bias. It's like, no, that's what's called the only way to know for yourself what you're experiencing matters to you.
Mm-hmm. Almost that you're you.
Yeah. So I think that's why the Bible focuses a lot on like don't walk by faith and not by sight. Like don't look at what's in the external world because you can be tricked. Someone can create an external reality to manipulate you, but
Right.
they can't manipulate you internally unless you allow them inside of you.
Right.
So you have control over what's going on inside of your mind until you give someone control, until you say, oh yeah, let those thoughts enter, let
Yeah.
them take it. No, you build your own internal framework that you decide, like, hey, this is my inner architecture. I'm putting
Yeah.
this room here. I'm putting this room here. This is where truth is. This is where the basement is. This is where the stairs are. So when people come visit in my mind, I'm like, that's cool and all, but you guys got to leave now.
Right.
Like
Right.
I always say,
Right.
I always say you can entertain ideas, like you can entertain company.
Yeah.
Because like, it's time for you guys to leave. You've been here long enough. I don't have to let you take up residence. So I think the only thing that you can really rely on is truth. I mean, I don't remember which verse, but the verse I quote a lot is God says, "Heaven and earth will pass away, but my word will never pass away." And I was like, "Yo, that's ridiculous." Like you're saying, literally, like the planets and the universe
Oh,
could
my
pass away,
word.
but God's like, "My words," because His words created the universe. He's like, "Yo, dog, this earth, I said let there be." Like that earth is there because I said be. It's not the other way around. So I would say words, God's word, the truth is like the only thing you can depend upon because it's what everything else is dependent upon.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, wow. That's a lot. That's good stuff. When I think of, to take it back to creativity for a second, because the only way I think I can get back to it, you could argue, and I'm not a big fan of organized religion because by definition, I think at least 99% of it has to be mostly wrong. So I would say, however, what's wonderful about it is that creativity is its engine. And like what we were talking about, like with the Bible opening words and so forth, in the beginnings, I mean, that is the essence of creativity. There's nothing more creative than like what we were both jumping around, is that God's doing all this creation. The story, I should say, is that all this creation is happening. Clearly, and I use clearly, I can't stand when people do it when it's not clear, but I feel this is clear. I mean, people argue to the contrary all the time, but I'm like, seriously, otherwise intelligible people making these claims that are just not intelligible. It's like Genesis is not a scientific account, period, full stop. Despite everybody's best effort, or a lot of people's best effort, to try to make it that way, you'll hear fundamentalists treat this as if it is scientific fact. Bro, it's metaphor, clear and day. It's fun, even. It's exciting to read it, but I don't take that as the account of, well, it's in the Bible. That's how it happened. Bro, humans are stupid. Humans are real stupid. Like, and that's present day. I mean, you can go on. Have you ever watched what's his name? What's his name there? He's got the fun play on words for his name. Justin, whatchamacallit, the guy who interviews people in Times Square, asking them all the basic facts.
I think I know who you're talking
Ju-
about.
what's his name spells Justin. I forget what he calls himself. Oh man, I have to look up. I mean, he's just sitting there. He goes, 20 years ago, what year was it? People sit there for hours and they'll be like, 2010. And he's like, at 1:15, what time is it? And they'd be like, 1:20. It's like that kind of stuff. This guy's all day. I could watch them all day. I mean, he's in there quizzing people. He goes, how many presidents have there been in America? And this girl jumps in. She goes, I think it's 4. And he goes, good, right. He always says right after, like when people are completely wrong. Right? I mean, I'm not exaggerating these questions, right? Like one of them, he asked this girl in the middle of Times Square. He goes, name 5 states. She goes, oh man, you got me. She's like, New York. He's like, good. She goes, Manhattan. He goes, yep. She goes, Brooklyn. She goes, is that a state? He goes, yep. She goes, the Bronx. He goes, oh, you got it. Right.
5 boroughs.
Right. And she was proud of herself, right? And so we're not very smart people, right? At least about social norms and things that are important, right? We don't have the rules down. And it's like, I say this in my math class all the time, very anecdotal as it is. Justin Awad is his name. Justin Awad. It's funny, right? Justin Awad. You got to look him up on Instagram. You could literally go down the bunny hole for hours upon end, right? Justin Awad 1 is his name. If you have not watched Justin Awad, I don't know what you're waiting for. Actually, let me put one on the mic. Let me share one right now, just so to give you an idea. We'll go back to where I'm heading with this. All right. So you have to indulge me. Here we go. Okay.
Plus 55.
155.
How many different leaves does a 4-leaf clover have?
3, I think. 4-leaf clover.
Sorry, Clubhouse. You're not getting it.
I think
Yeah, that's 3.
3. I think I can't remember.
Yes. What's 3 times 3 times 3?
Is it
9.
an exponent or multiplication?
Yes. What's 55 plus 55?
155.
How many different leaves does a 4-leaf
How many
clover
different
have?
leaves does a 4-leaf clover have?
3, I
Says
think.
3.
4-leaf clover. I think
Yeah, that's 3.
3. I think I can't remember.
Yes. What's 3 times 3 times 3?
Is it
9.
If the time is 1:15, then what time is it?
12.
Yes. Can you name 5 states?
There we go.
Staten Island.
5 states.
States. Damn. Berkeley. Nah, I don't even know.
4 more states. Any states you want.
New York.
Oh, you got 2?
Manhattan. I don't know.
3.
That's
2 more.
That's a state.
Yeah.
Oh. Oh,
2 more.
shit. Queens. I don't know if that's a state. I don't know.
4. 1 more.
Let
Any
me
state.
The Bronx.
5.
This might be the best
How
entertainment
many
there is.
presidents have we had so far?
4.
4 presidents.
In total.
4.
Yes. If the time is 1:15, then what time is it?
12.
It's endless. I mean,
Yes.
he's got thousands
Can you name 5?
of these. They just.
Do you know who the first
watch this.
president of the USA was?
George Floyd. I mean,
Let me say George Floyd was the first president. You got
his name
George.
is George, though.
He said
I
his
just
name
don't know
is
the
George.
last
Washington. How many inches are in 2 feet?
I don't know.
Around how many inches?
Around how many inches in 2 feet?
If you had to guess.
5.
Yes. If you're walking north and then all of a sudden you turn right, what direction are you facing?
So if I'm going, say that again real quick.
You're walking north and then you just make a hard right. What direction are you facing? 90 degrees to the right.
Is it south? No, it's not south. West?
Yes. Do you know who the first president of the USA was?
George
Oh
Floyd.
my goodness.
I mean,
is there anything
Yeah.
better to do than to watch this? I mean,
Do you know what the 4 directions on a compass are?
No, not at all.
If you had to guess. On a compass. Give me your best guess.
On a compass.
Yeah. Do you know what a compass is?
I got nothing.
Have you heard of a compass before?
Maybe.
Yeah, okay. That was kind of hard. Do you know what 7 plus
Kind of a
7
hard
plus 7 is?
7 plus 7 plus 7. My
28.
son heard this.
Do you know who fought in the Mexican-American War?
Fuck no, I don't know.
Give me a guess. 2 countries. Who fought?
America and Utah.
Yes.
I mean,
Do you know what the 4 directions on a compass are?
I can't hear you over here.
No, not at all.
If you had to guess.
Well, yeah, I got
Yeah.
the gist of it.
Yeah. And so my point is that now we want to go back 2,000 years, right? And believe that the geniuses who are walking around that earth nailed it, right? Like, at best, not only is it metaphor, right? It's hopefully in the ballpark. And it stands the test of time because it's in the ballpark, right? It feels like it's in the ballpark. Like whoever did this did some brilliant, you could say God inspired work, right? Like this is brilliant. Now, it's funny because, and this is my point, it's funny because every book of religions is pretty good. And when you think of that, when you think of that subsection right now of how poorly informed a lot of our citizens are, right? Do you think it was better 2,000, 4,000, 6,000 years ago when a lot of like major world religions or their antecedent were forming, right? And it's clearly no, right? And now, granted, it might have been the best and brightest minds that were doing some of the writing because that's what it was at the time, right? If people were doing oral traditions or writing or whatever it was, just to be an orator at that time set you apart from the average. But we are not talking about a time where you want to be taking people's word as the literal word in any of the religions that you read, because you read it and you go, this is bat crazy. This is crazy. Otherwise, normal human beings. So you walk down the street and find someone who is a Rasta, or find someone who is a Jehovah Witness, or find someone who's a whatever, Mormon, Scientologist, whatever religion is you want to do, right? These are otherwise normal and intelligent people who believe asinine things. They're just there's no other way to put it. I mean, when you read Scientology, there's no way to put that other than it's just the most asinine thing I've ever heard in my life. There's nothing crazier to me than Scientology. It is so far removed from reality land that it's hard to imagine that someone like Tom Cruise actually believes this, right? And so the question is, either he doesn't believe it and he's pretending, or he's not had time to think about it, or he does believe it and he's rationalized that part of his belief. Where everything else, he's like, yep, this works. Up, down, north, south, east, west. Yep. But a guy who wrote, and forgive me for not getting this perfect, but before the documentaries, I'm taking this knowledge from. So, and I did see some of the Scientology documentaries, but dude who wrote science fiction books and uses the same characters in his religion, right?
L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah, L. Ron Hubbard, right? The Dianetics guy uses the same characters he was writing in the sci-fi books in his Bibles, right? Or whatever they're called, to reach the ninth Adventist or whatever. I know I'm totally crossing up my metaphors or whatever, but it's just nuts. It's nuts. But you talk to the people and they're not nuts. So we have to think there's a bit of nuts in every single religion. When you read it, you go, okay, so you think that there's this person who's half cow and it's like, bro, clearly that's just not true. And we have to take a grain of salt, I think, with when we read the Old Testament and we do the same thing. I have to go, that's my belief. But my belief is it's probably in the ballpark to some truth. But the problem is we get into this whole, into reality. It's like, who am I to say that wasn't this person's reality? It's very difficult for me to say that, even to say factually that didn't happen, as bat crazy that sounds. And nuts, it didn't happen to me. People talking about getting hypnotized. I can't be hypnotized. There's no possible way, because I don't believe in it, right? I don't believe in astrology. I think it's crazy. I think every person who believes astrology needs to have their head examined. And I want to be the person to do it. I don't believe in any of it. It's complete garbage. It has no basis in reality, none. But yet there are people who will give their last dollar to astrology just because. And they'll say, oh, we're just having fun. If you press them on it, they'll say, oh, we just like it for the fun. But what is it about it that is fun for you? What is it about whatever crazy religion there is that's fun for you? And so I find myself doing this with my own. And there's certain things that I'll come up with and I'll say, this was just a story. And people will argue and they'll be like, no, this is how it happened. Do I really, really believe that there was a burning bush and that God was speaking through a burning freaking bush? I'm not going to fight with someone over that. If you want to, cool. But you have to say to yourself, that jumps outside of the reality of everything else that you've ever seen in the history of mankind for you, because you've never seen that. But you're going to accept that thing definitely happened. That's where I have the problem. You can accept it. You can be because just what I said, I can't not say it didn't happen. It wasn't someone else's reality. But you're going to mount your life on the fact that you're going to live your entire life that the burning bush, and that's probably a poor example, was concrete reality. Isn't there a chance that it's metaphor and we got it wrong? Isn't there a chance that the dummies who wrote the book got that part wrong? Right? Isn't there a chance that the 10 Commandments were a lot better than they originally were? I'm just putting it out there. Isn't it possible that this is a good work that could have been better, and that our dummies who we left to do the interpretation got it wrong? I don't buy that they were so divinely inspired that the word is. Come on, bro. They were so divinely inspired that the word has stayed true. Bro, 3 geniuses lock them in a room, can't get this story straight. It happens all the time. But we have to, they were divinely inspired. Bro, there's no way that all the people were divinely inspired and got it all right. There's so many freaking fallacies. As a person who wants to root for the Bible that are in the Bible, you can't. You're completely lying to yourself if you're not saying, okay, this is a fallacy. So I get upset when I see the people trying to fight the good fight, because I try to fight the good fight too, but I'm rational about it. I'm like, in my reality, this part over here is a stretch of the truth. It's an allegory, it's metaphor, it's a poem. You took my book of poetry and you thought every metaphor was fact. That's what I'm saying. And I'm like, I'm with the meaning, I'm with the message, but I'm not necessarily with the conviction. So I don't bicker with people about it all the time.
Right.
I'm just saying my truth of truths is I don't know, but I'm not willing to, like throw myself off the edge of the cliff and say, because it said so in book X, Y, or Z. I'm like, what makes sense? What makes sense to me is we didn't just get here by accident. That's what makes sense to me. And I'm not 100% sure how we did. And I know there's some good evidence over here. And by the way, I don't like when scientists dismiss, be like, this isn't evidence. Of course, it's evidence. It might not be the kind of evidence you want to have, but it's
Right.
like, you know what I'm saying? You can't throw out the Bible and say it's not evidence. We got evidence in the Bible, right? Let's start from there.
Right.
And you may not agree with all of it, but that should be the discussion. It should be like, yo, as opposed to you're crazy because you think that every single word in there is not true. And I'm
Right.
saying it from the opposite side. And I'm saying you're crazy if you think every single word in there is true. That's at least the point for discussion, and all the creativity that's in there, and all the explanations that serve and make rational sense in most cases, you can't dismiss. So you got to say, yo, there could be something very, very true in here, and especially for some people whose reality we can't positively measure with accuracy, because we don't even, like you said, if you don't have someone standing next to you to verify that happened, how do you know it really did? So the world is nuts, bro. It's nuts, and people
Well,
in New York prove it.
Well, I'll end on, I think my take on it is, always emphasize philosophy and imagination. One, philosophy is your bridge to the Bible, your bridge to God. A lot of people, when they hear the word philosophy, they go like, "Oh, what are you trying to say?" Like especially if you talk to some Christians, they think philosophy is like, "Well, that's
Like it's crap.
secondary." It's like,
Yeah.
well, what I'm saying is you can read the Bible, but if you don't have a personal connection to what the words are saying, and you don't have a personal connection to God, you're just reading like
You're reading.
You're reading, or it's like someone giving you a blueprint to a generic house. Like, hey, here's a house, and you're like, cool, and then you move in, you're like, this doesn't work. It's like, yeah, because you didn't take the time to personalize it. You didn't say, I want my kitchen to look this way, and I want my living room to look this way. You just said, oh, that's what a lot of people do. They just hear something in church and they go, okay, I guess this is the house my parents gave me, I'll live in. It's like, no, you have to build your own house. And that's why you see a lot of these people doing now what's called deconstructing. And they're like, oh, this is all crap now. Christianity, I'm leaving my roots. It's like, no, you never had your roots. You never built your house. You just sat in someone's house and you're upset that it doesn't work. You got to have a blueprint. So anybody who goes to church and they just listen to the preacher and they come home and watch TV, I'm like, no, you have to go make sure that works for you.
Right.
If the preacher says something, I'm like, okay, good. That's one verification. He said, okay, let me go try that. And if he hadn't done it in his life, I'm like, why are you telling me? Like, don't be telling me stuff you don't believe yet. And that's what you got a lot of people just up there saying stuff and, just a lot of, empty words. It's like, no, I'm not going to buy a product that you haven't bought into. And matter of fact, I'm not waiting for you to buy into the product. Like, I'm doing my own research on the product at home. Like that part of the organized religion, I would say, yeah, is the problem. People become lazy minded.
Right.
It's just like school. You sit there, you listen to someone teach you. You say, all right, I guess this is the information I'm supposed to learn, but I'm not really going to personalize it. So then it doesn't really stick to you. It's not really integrated into who you are. And you're like, oh, this doesn't work. It's like, no, you have to own it. You got to really make it a part of yourself. You have to really think. You have to think. So philosophy, imagination, number 2, because this is the thing that I've really been harping on the past few years. Like, imagination to me is the bridge to the spiritual. Because if you're reading the Bible and you're reading Revelation, if you don't have an imagination, you're just like, oh, this is stupid. This doesn't make, I guess it makes sense to me now. I've always been very confused when people are like, man, this book of Revelation is so weird. That's my favorite book.
Right.
I was sitting in
By
the back
far,
of church.
by far.
I was like, yo, beasts, like in dragons. I'm like, yes.
Swords
I'm
of
like,
wisdom. You got like
when is this movie coming out? You got harlots and Babylon.
Yeah.
I was like, yo, I actually want to film this movie. But
seven seals and 7 stars.
Angel stars.
It's crazy, man. Trumpets.
Bowls.
We got everything.
Heaven, hell. I'm like, yo. So
7 seals out his mouth, a sword out. Like what? Like,
birds come eat the flesh of the kings. I was like, yo, this thing is vivid. So when people would say like this book is confusing, I never knew what they were talking about. I was like, what do you mean confusing?
Might not be the right word, but it's definitely layered.
Well, I mean, I guess it just speaks to what I'm saying. Like, if you are taught to turn off that imagination, then when you read it, you just go like, "Oh, I don't get this."
And it's I mean, there's no better imagination because we know it was from dream. You know what I mean? I mean, it wasn't a hidden fact that this was interpretation of a dream, right? I mean, so shouldn't it be vivid? Right? Like, I don't know about you, but my dreams are way out there, like way, way, way out there. And if I believe that my dream is interpretive, which I do many times, right? I'll be like, oh, this must mean something, right? Like, it's just natural for us to try to do that. But to say is confusing, it's like, well, reality is confusing. Our dreams are confusing. Math is confusing. You know, it's like a lot of the stuff worth learning is confusing. And speaking of worth learning, when I think of like the Bible, literally, when we say commandments, right? What the Bible commands me to do, I have zero problem with the commandments of all the Abrahamic religions, right? I mean, they all have the same root, 10 commandments. So if you're reading the rest of the Bible, especially, Old Testament, I'm reading them as more of like, here's why you would want to uphold the 10 commandments. Like, a lot of that is a sort of a referendum on this is what we got. These are the 10 commandments. This is why you should do this. And here are some pinpoint stories about them. Now, it's not a one for one. It's not perfect. There's some stuff in there you go, woo, why did this make the cut? You're like, this seems way out there. This is, you know what I mean? Like, this is like, who was doing the editing on that chapter, right? And it's like, okay, it's loosely connected to one of them, but I needed someone to maybe, do the interpretation for me. Like, why this, why that? But even when you get into other religions that aren't even Abrahamic, there's other, I was talking about the Buddhist earlier. I mean, like, you can take most religions and you're going to find at least a handful specifically when you look at Buddhist doctrine, there's the 5, whatchamacallits, the percepts or whatever they call them. But they have it, and they're 5 are the same as 5 of the 10. So when you're talking about like all the major world religions, or at least like the biggest ones, I know we're not counting Hinduism in there, but a lot of Hinduism, there's some similarities with Buddhism as well. But when you compare the commandments, at the end of the day, these are things you shouldn't be doing, and living your life according to them will actually lead you to a good place. I don't have a problem. I don't like, is there a commandment that you read and go, man, I can't keep with that one? Whew, that's a tough one. Like, I don't find anything extremely difficult. Am I missing something? Like why would you argue against that? Maybe there's some more that should be thrown in. Maybe some of them seem out of date. But when you try to update some of the commandments creatively, you can think of like, well, we have some good rationale now why you probably wanted to follow number 1, why you wanted to follow number 2, why you want to follow number 3, and what happens when you don't.
Right. And
I find a lot of the creative in the Bible is backup for why you should follow, and not just the Bible, like I said, all the other religions as well. And when people are like, oh, I can't get with it because of this story. No, I get you. I'm the first one to say that about, like, but I'm saying the whole religion. When I read like the L. Ron Hubbard stuff, it's like, bro, you just wrote a sci-fi book and you gave it to the people and sold it off as your personal thing. And we know that, the quackery that went on there. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen in all religions. It does. And that's a very bad representation. But I'm like, what in that particular religion, right, to look at, what in that makes you say, oh yeah, this feels like all good stuff I should be doing? Like, if you feel great by it, stand by it. If you don't, don't. But appreciate the way that people thousands of years ago came up with ways to communicate this to one another the creativity that they recognized in the world, the universe, and God's playground, if you will, and appreciate the fact that you still have no better rationale. You still have no better rationale for the sort of for the creation story other than we say, well, we know a few more things now. Well, but guess what? At the end of the day, they're equally confusing, and creativity is going to be creativity is the source of science. Creativity is the source of obviously our poetry, our great pastimes, some of the inspiration to do what it is we do. When we look up in the sky, we see the creativity that there is in the universe. You can't help but looking through James Webb and going, oh my gosh, I could look through this thing eternally. And you're going to sit there and go, yeah, that just happened by accident.
Well, one, I just noticed your Clubhouse was muted, so we.
Oh, sorry, sorry, Clubhouse.
We got that on Restream, but
we're gonna make these Clubhouse people get on and find it on some social media platform.
Well, yeah, I mean, to the thing I was saying about imagination, though, is, I mean, my biggest thing is, I say imagination and faith are in the same family. They're cousins, they're brothers, sisters. Yes. But imagination, faith, play, pretend. Because in order for you to download these transcendent ideas, you have to have the capacity to receive them. So if your mind is constantly focused on facts, then as soon as God's like, hey, here's an image, you're gonna be like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. That's stupid. Reject. Right? So that's why when you're a little kid, I said it this way, it's like your childlike imagination grows up into adult-like faith. So it's like when your imagination, your kid, you're practicing to become an adult. As you grow up, you're going to be like, man, how am I going to do that? How am I going to do that? It's like, well, you didn't practice your imagination as a kid. So now when you're an adult and God's like, have faith, you're like, that doesn't make sense. It's like, yes, it doesn't make sense. It's not supposed to make sense in the way that you're thinking. It's supposed to make imaginative sense. Or like I heard this one preacher, Frederick Price, he was around for a while. He died recently. But he said, people say, oh, faith doesn't make sense. He says, that's incorrect. He said, faith makes sense in the context of the faith.
Right.
You know, he's like, yeah, if you're saying use faith in the science context, of course it's not going to work because it's different rules. He's like, what I'm saying is faith has its own set of rules. And just because you don't agree with them doesn't mean they're not the rules. It means you just don't like them. But he's saying, you know, faith says, hey, when you have faith and you include God in your decision making, that's the rules. So to someone who doesn't believe in any of those, yeah, it's all nonsensical. But to the person who's like, oh, yeah, I'm having faith and I believe faith plus trust in God. Oh, right. Yeah. If I have this plus God, then this is going to happen.
Well, there's an interesting thing that I go to Kobe Bryant, right? Like I believe Kobe Bryant could will the ball to go in the basket. like the faith that he had that ball was going to go in, I feel like made the ball go in. You know, like, dude, you have no business taking that shot. There's no right. world in which that ball goes in. It's the scenario of which he has to hit an impossible shot. And Jordan, same, obviously, times 10. There's no way that ball is going in, and it goes in. And we say, killer. We're like, he's a killer, right? Like, which is a funny thing in itself. But it's like, that dude's faith in his ability, in his belief to manifest that ball to go through the hoop, like to communicate with the ball and get it through the hoop, is that next level. Right. I'm a good shooter, but I can't do that. You know what I'm saying? Like I mean, maybe once in a while you tap into it, you go, oh man, there's no way I'm missing the shot, and you feel like we say you're in the zone. And I've had some of those, right? But it's like not at the level where you're playing at the like world caliber level. Like you play in a local gym, and you're like, oh, this is money. I'm gonna win the game right here. Boom, and right. You do. You what is it? It's faith, right? It's faith. It's a belief that ball is going through the hoop. Like I've already seen the outcome, right? When you think of science, there's a lot of things that if you're asked to take on faith that make less sense. For instance, like, oh, you want me to just believe that there's multi-dimensions, right? Let alone, what does it even mean to be in 3 dimensions? Like you start talking to people like, what's a 4th dimension we throw time in? Like you got to take like 10 classes for a year to come up with a real conception of how time could be another dimension. Let alone when we talk about the fact that there could be 9, 13 dimensions. Like, do me a favor. Use your creativity the best you can and try to imagine a different dimension. And the problem is you can't really do it unless someone gives you a metaphor to push you into the right direction. You can't do it. You'll fail. You won't come up with that creative thought usually on your own, just like if someone says, "Hey, Bernard, come up with another sense," right, other than your general five, right? You might be able to think of a different sense that you have. Like we could
Right.
argue that sensing temperature, some people will say is a sixth sense, right?
Right.
To me, it's more like a sense of touch through our skin or something, like through the ether or whatever. But it is, right? We can go, oh, it's hot out. How do we know that? Like, like how does our body register heat externally, right? Like you could argue that, right? But pretend there is another sense, you're going to have no way to even explain it to anyone because you have to use the five senses that you have to explain it. Just like I did when I was trying to even explain smell, right? It's like a taste that's in the air. I mean, there's no real good way that you can do these things. So we cannot conceive of that higher dimension, that
Right.
higher sense until it's revealed for us. So I think science needs to slow down and understand that there's a whole lot that we don't have perfect with the metaphor of science, with the process of science, but that the creativity that is involved to even conjecture these ideas are no less crazy than some of the ones that are in
Right.
many works of quote unquote faith. What I will say though is that for some of the books that are out there, when I say that somebody who believes in everything that's in our physical world, and then it's like, oh yeah, this one over here makes total sense. No, it doesn't. Just acknowledge it doesn't make sense is what I'm saying. People will try to rationalize, oh, dude, you're trying to rationalize a three-headed monster alien that comes down and swivels on a point, and you're like, oh yeah, it's in the book. And it's like, bro, no. Do some little intellectual creativity for yourself. Do some, how does that make sense for you? Don't just take it on faith, and your faith would grow stronger, would be my message. And it sounds counterintuitive, but what I mean by that is when you're used to pushing yourself to find a creative way that thing could exist, then you're stretching that muscle. And when it
Right.
doesn't for you, I say don't be lazy and just say, well, I take it on faith. Because that to me is lazy. I don't think faith means you blindly take it to be because I said so. That's not what faith is about to me. That's not the definition of faith. Faith is a trust, right? But where does trust come from? I would ask that question to everybody. Like, where does your trust come from? Trial and error, getting to know someone. So whether it's getting to know God, getting to know your family, my puppy's trying to develop trust when it goes down the steps that it's not going to fall over, right? It's trial and error. It's gaining competency. You would never do anything in the physical world if you said, oh, just trust that it'll happen. There would be very little that you would do. You have to have some mechanism for where it sits in your brain and interprets for
Right.
you to go, I can live with that. Unfortunately, as rational humans, we have a tough time going, oh yeah, I can deal with that when it's irrational, right? Your brain is not hardwired to take irrational stuff and just go, yeah, I'm good with it. So just check yourself when you're doing it is what I say to people. Check yourself, find a way to make sense of it. And if it doesn't, take accounting of those things that there are and just do more work. What I say a lot of times to our math students is there seems like there's not a solution. And then if I show you a method and then I let you play around with it, all of a sudden you go, wait a minute, there was one there. So I'm asking you to have faith, but I'm not asking you to have complete blind faith that it just works because I say so. The lazy math instructor is the one who says, take my word for it because I say so.
Right.
No, show me a way. And then I will build faith the next time you ask me to do something as egregious as just have faith that it'll work out. I'll have a little bit more to go on that you're not just leading me down a bunny trail because you don't know the answer.
Right.
But,
Well, I think that gets into the idea too that we always get into when the thinker is excluded from society, from church, you get that laziness. Like the thinker says, hey, it's okay to question. But I think what's happened traditionally in church culture is like when you ask questions, like I know someone who says when you ask questions, it's seen as doubt. Like if you
right.
say, hey God, but what about this? Oh, you're having doubt. And it's like, well, I'm not having doubt. It's like I'm trying to understand more. So
Conceptualize how this fits.
yeah, like so it's almost like you're punished for thinking or questioning. And if you bring up a question in church, it's like, whoa, hey man, you're way out there. You're kind of out there, buddy. Just bring it back to the simple things. And it's like, no, like this is how I'm made. Like I'm wired to think. Like I'm not doubting God.
Right.
I just want to know how it works. So that's first thing. The last two things I was going to say
and where I push back on that is I don't think it's doubting God. I take it differently. I doubt a lot of books of faith because I believe that a lot of it was done with cheesy craftsmanship. Whereas, and I'm like, no, this part right here isn't working for me. I just never take it as blanket, like, oh, it's all good. Like I take the 10 Commandments, but I also go through and do inventory in some of my work, and I've been like, this doesn't register, and I've never heard anything compelling for it. So answer for me means it's not all perfect, and it's not flawless. That's my own take on it. You know, I know a lot of people argue with that, and I get it, but I'm just like, I can't rectify it on faith alone when I think a bunch of boneheads were responsible for a lot of what we have in there as what might be the error. I don't believe the infallible word, never going to, because there's too much fallible in there for me that when I do the sniff test for me, it doesn't follow. And that's why I always say to people, I'll say, well, I always say, I don't have great faith. Like I'm a poor faith Christian. Like I have a lot of doubt. I have a lot of doubt that it feels like some fatty acid got in the writing, and I can point to it. I can go here, and then I hear somebody's
Well,
opinion on it. I'll be like, okay, we just
Well,
don't
they-
gel on
Right.
all the details. But
I think it's like I'm saying though, like because you probably have very rarely encountered other thinkers. Like you've probably encountered people who just been like, oh, well, yeah.
take it on faith. Yeah.
Well, they haven't thought it through themselves.
Right.
And so they give these like pat answers that they hope satisfy you or pacify you.
Right.
And you go home like that wasn't anything. Like, I mean, I've gone to churches where I'm just like, let's talk about something like challenging, but you can just see the looks on people's faces like, whoa, we're getting deep in here. And I'm just like, what do you mean? Like, this is what we're supposed to be doing.
Well, no, I do that all the time. I do it all the time with the flood. Like the flood to me is the biggest part of nonsense in the whole Bible to me. There's a flood story in every history that there is. I don't doubt that there was a flood, but when I take the word as is written, right, and I'm going, okay, 2 by 2, really, in an ark that size, really, what miracle happened that allowed, like, where did we get like the minutia of animals that are in like the southern horn of Africa? Like they all just swam to the boat at the same time, and they all just like show. Like to me, I'm just like, there's so much that is insulting to my scientific mind. Like I can't throw that away. Like there's a whole lack of explanation for that. No, and that's the thing that I'll do. I'll look, I'll listen, I'll read, and I'll be like, BS, 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 BS. And at some point I have to go, this subsection over here, to me, feels like the BS part snuck in. And I'm like, there's no ark in the mountain. It's not going to be there because it didn't happen. Like that's just where it's like it didn't happen. That is a metaphor that God is like, you dumbasses. Like, how did you think that I meant this actually literally? And I'm like, you know, and I always get into problems where I'm like, do I really believe the God of the Old Testament's the God of the New Testament? It's like, do I think he was drowning the babies? And that's another challenging one, right? Was God drowning everyone? Is the all-perfect God going to say, I screwed it all up. Let's start over. Like, seriously? Like, is that not metaphor for me? And I know you might be one. I know there's plenty of people that challenge me on that and be like, no, but you got to understand. My father-in-law does all the time. And I'm like, bro, it's not happening. The infallible word of God didn't pass this muster test on this particular thing. It doesn't mean that I'm throwing out, most of everything else. I'm fighting for everything else, but you can't fight with me on this one because I'm not coming around to it because it's metaphor, bro. God went up and he got like Noah? We're supposed to believe that Noah went and got donkeys and he got starfish and he got like, it's just, I mean, I hate to say it, it's just stupid to me that people would fight on that point with me. It's like, give me a reason for how every bit of diversity happened, or did evolution happen after that point? Like, you know, and I have that all the time, and I'm like, this is the one. This is the big stickling point I have. Like,
Right.
if you're gonna stick with Noah's Ark, be prepared for me to hit you with 4,000 things that don't make sense about it. And that's when I have to go. It's metaphor, because for me to have there to be truth, the whole thing that has to be metaphor, because that can't have happened. There might have been a boat. Not saying there wasn't a boat. Not saying there wasn't a flood. Not saying there wasn't some 2 by 2 action going on.
Right.
But do you know how many freaking millions of organisms we're talking about? Millions, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's like,
Well, I think
square that circle for me, and I'm good. You know.
I think the other thing though is one.
I see you. My little man's out there too.
Yeah, this is the last thing I was going to say. I think one, we live in such a science, what's the word? Like science-driven culture that people are afraid to go against science. So like most people wouldn't even have that conversation because they're going to be, I think it's just the tables are flipped. There's probably people who were beat down with religion, how they grew up, and they weren't allowed to talk about science. So they're like, haha, now it's our turn. Your religion is stupid. You don't even get to talk. So if somebody did want to talk about the flood, that person's not even allowed to speak at all, because it's like, you're a dummy for believing anything. So I think people are afraid to even allow their mind to go to that place and be like, okay, let's really think about the flood and all the aspects of it, because instantly it's like, nah, you're dumb, you're stupid. There's not even like, people's minds are not even, it's
not
basically
not even open to the possibility.
yeah, you're just like, the fear of being called stupid is what people is where we're at now. So you can't even talk. So I think that's part of it. It's like, there's not even a room for actual conversation, because the scientists already got their arms folded, like, oh, let's see what these idiots are gonna say. So it's not even a real dialogue. It's just like, I just want you to talk. I can call you stupid.
I'm not too far from that one on that particular point.
So that's one
I
thing.
say it though because listening to that one so often, no one gets into the meat of that, and I've heard people get into the meat of it, the attempted meat, and I'm just like, once they start going down the trail of where I've seen the dead end before, I'm like, just stop.
Right.
Don't go into the mathematics of how it fits in the boat, because that's not going to work.
Right.
You can go somewhere else, and I want you to, but it's like.
But partially to your point, though, I think some people can also use that as an excuse. I'm not saying people are wrong for wanting intellectual rigor, because I'm the same way. When people can't explain stuff, I'm like, okay, why should I believe you then? Like, I had a discussion with some Mormons one time, and I kept bringing up points, and they were like, oh man, I never thought about that. I was like, but you want me to believe it? So if you haven't like rationalized your own thing, I'm like, why am I buying the product that you haven't yet tried and verified? But also, it doesn't mean that everybody has gone through every story in their mind.
That's right. Very few have.
Yeah. So, but I think to the point is like, I think what science tries to do a lot of times is say, oh, see, you didn't understand the story. You don't even know. And that, to me, sometimes that's an excuse for them to not investigate themselves. Like I was saying, like, the scientists can be like, oh, that's the stupidest story I ever heard. I was like, but have you also abandoned all inhibitions, prohibitions, biases, and said, I'm going to take a clean slate of a believer and try to believe what this person believes? No, most scientists don't have the humility to do that. They don't have the humility to be like, I'm going to be the person I hate right now.
Right.
So
and what's tired me is I've been that person, and I've been like, oh, please don't. Like, people will start with you as if, and I'm like, bro, like, I was born in the 70s, right? Like I was reading this stuff before you knew what it was, Like, I'm like, in the 80s when I took that job, right? Let me put it in perspective, right? In the late 80s when I took that job, I was reading about things that you just found out 2 years ago about, right? So let's put it in perspective. Slow your roll. Like and I'll say, like, the amount of books, the amount of debates I've watched people speak on it. I'm sitting there rooting. I'm like, hey, we're gonna find it this time. It's gonna be up in the mountain. Oh, we're gonna get it now. We got satellite. It's coming. But it ain't coming.
Right. But I think though, again, like I said, this is not an excuse to not have an intellectual rigor.
That's right.
I think what happens is people will pick these age-old debates about stuff they know is not really the heart of the Bible. So yeah, we can focus on Noah and the flood.
It's fringe, right?
Great.
Right? That's what
you can focus on Noah and the flood, but the Bible starts to be like, hey, this says Noah and the flood. Great. You don't want to believe that? What about the stuff that says your heart is evil and you need God?
Yes.
Like
that's where I'm more at.
The Bible is trying to lead you towards that. It's like, hey, this thing right here, you're separate from God. You need Christ to reconcile you. What's your point on that?
To me, that's right. That's like, honor thy mother and father is no better exemplified through the flood story. Like, to me, that it's like, I'm like, hey, here's what happens when you piss off the big man. It's like, that was what it was like for me.
But so the other thing the last thing I was gonna wrap up and say was that subjectivity and imagination is what I think science has purposefully eliminated in order to not have to look inward and look at the self. Back to that philosophy, that self-examination. Because if I can always argue that something can't be proven objectively or factually, that's my opt out. Can't prove it objectively or factually. You're stupid. It's like, yeah, but you're eliminating the fact that you are a human with a heart and emotions and a subjective point of view, and you're trying to act like that's not a true thing, because then you don't have to look at it and say, oh man,
and it makes you lazy on the other side. Yeah.
So it's like, oh, the Bible, when it says, look at my own heart, it's talking about me, the mote in my eye, and the guy got the splinter. Oh, I'm supposed to be looking at, I don't want to do that. I want to look outward at the facts. I mean, you see people do that with all kinds of stuff. They're like, oh, well, the data says that crime has gone down. Doesn't matter. The person who's in front of you just said they got mugged. Like,
Just
that's
didn't go
still a
down for
real experience. Like, oh, but there's 2% less crime, but I still got stabbed. The percentage doesn't change my experience.
Yep.
So I think a lot of times science tries to eliminate subjectivity and personal experience and emotions and story and narrative and personhood and creativity, because then they have to deal with the self. And when you have to deal with the self, you can't quantify your way out of that. And if you can't quantify your way out of that, it leads you to the end of yourself where you're then like, oh, dang, why did I yell at my wife this morning or my kid? Or why did I have that evil thought? So I think that's yeah, like you're saying, laziness on both sides. I think there's some people, they read the Bible their whole life, they didn't ever own it and they never thought it. And then there's some people who haven't read the Bible, or they read it with an objective lens to avoid what the Bible's trying to get at, literally the heart of the matter, literally your heart. So that's why I said that subjectivity, that imagination is vital, like you were saying earlier with the creativity. If you start to eliminate the human parts, well, you have to eliminate yourself because you're a human. So I never understand when scientists are like, well, we have to think objectively. You mean we have to think as objects, or look at the world as if they're only objects? Okay, try that. Why? How can you observe?
And this is why we have the STEM problem in the country that we have. Exactly why we have the problem.
How can you observe the universe as an object when you yourself have subjective feelings? That is an objective fact. The universe is made up objectively of humans who have subjective experience. Oh, but we need to put that aside. How can you put aside truth? How can you put aside reality? How can you deny your own emotions? Yes, you may not like them, but you can't deny them.
And that's the last word. And Henry's telling me it's the last word, so we gotta go. Excellent stuff, man. We could go on all day. Wonderful stuff. I hope people enjoy our little introspective on IntroVerse. All right, we gotta bang it out. We gotta get out of here, and we will see you all on the other side. I'm looking for this theme song before I go. Looking for it. Here we go. Right there.